Contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the heart of liberal Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Best friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Now here are your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. I guess it's a radio show. It's a podcast. It's a live stream. And welcome, Fancy Brian. Welcome also to my fine co-devil for the hour. He's Joe Zepecki. Vegas Joe. Joe, welcome back, man. Always great to have you come around.
Happy to be here. How's everybody doing?
Well, fair to middling. I moved on beyond my early week hangover, big soiree at the Monkey on Tuesday. Did a hangover edition yesterday, and back to solid ground today. I feel like I'm back on solid ground, Joe.
Love it. Got to be able to put one foot in front of the other without falling over.
Joe, I got to tell you, man, I'm impressed. You did all the homework for the entire panel, so I didn't have to. And I haven't been doing any pleasure reading this week. I did buy the new book, Peril, but Joe, you've actually read the book, man. You did the homework.
I did. So I was supposed to get it the day it came out, and then I didn't get it until yesterday afternoon. I had some running around to do. Went to the Brewer game for a little while last night. So at about 10 o'clock last night, I cracked it and I finished it this morning. So I didn't get a lot of sleep, and I wouldn't really call it fun, enjoyable reading. But it's important reading that has to be done so that we understand exactly how much peril we're in, which I think we might get to in this hour.
I can't wait. A little worried about the spoiler effect. I haven't gotten to even page 2 yet. I haven't really cracked my copy, and I did get it on the opening day. But as I mentioned earlier, Joe, I had a big party. Real quick, let me set up another big guest coming in about an hour from now. Charles Franklin, a pollster of some renown. He is with the Marquette University Law School poll. And this time, Charles is dropping some national polling. And it's been sort of a two-part process. Yesterday, they dropped some polling on the U.S. Supreme Court. But today's topic from Charles Franklin, Joe, is Joe Biden, the president of the United States, and how did he handle Afghanistan? And Joe, I haven't seen all the polling numbers yet, but I got to tell you, the American people, at least according to Gallup and some earlier polling I saw, Joe Biden having a slump, man. Joe Biden's in the doldrums. Joe Biden seeing a precipitous drop in his approval, especially amongst independents.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that the honeymoon is over. And when we look historically, I think we'll actually find that this president got a little bit longer honeymoon than presidents are typically afforded. And I think there's really two reasons behind that. The first, of course, is who this president came after. Following the 4 years of chaos of President Trump, just by his nature, President Biden seemed like a refreshing breath of fresh air. And so I think that's why he got a little bit longer honeymoon. He also had the early win with the American Rescue Plan. And so he was going to get a little bit more patience from the American people. The second thing is, due to the pandemic, I think people understood just how tough a spot we were in, and they saw things moving in the right direction for a very long time. So it doesn't surprise me that over the course of the last couple of weeks, when we've had some global events that have sort of, been thrust upon us, and that the president, made decisions about and maybe didn't go as flawlessly as had been hoped for, and the fact that we are still in the midst of, a crisis with the pandemic. Of course, this president was going to take a hit. I think that's natural. The question now is, what does he do with it? And if he can get his legislative agenda through Congress, can he turn those numbers around before the end of the year? And that I'm sure we'll get to also.
Well, Joe, that's a big if, considering the fact that Joe Biden's numbers are down at the very time when he perhaps needs to exert his clout. Joe Biden got a lot of mileage out of the fact that he served in the U.S. Senate. And, he was the sort of reach across the aisle kind of guy. And Joe Biden, made promises to the American people. And, we know what campaign promises are worth ultimately, but he promised he was going to try to unify the American people. And of course, Republicans want no part of that, Joe. They're not playing along. They're not dancing with them. But here's the question. If Joe Biden is currently as unpopular as any modern president, perhaps barring Donald Trump, is now the time when he's going to be able to push through a $3.5 trillion infrastructure deal, try to keep the government open against the, backdrop of a Cliff Brinksmanship affair between us and the Republicans. And I mean, this is a good time, if Republicans wanted one, to just kind of blow it all up and make Joe look really, really bad, Joe.
Well, that's been their goal from day one. I mean, I don't want to spoil our discussion about the book, but that's one of the things that Senator McConnell said very early on is they're going to take the same approach that they took with President Obama and not support his agenda one bit. Right. And so, I think the opportunity for President Biden is he's got the votes, right? The Democrats have control of the Senate and the House, and they can get this done. I think it is natural to Joe Biden to want to have Republicans come along with, and he is going to take every effort and up to the last minute to try and, consistent with his campaign about restoring the soul of America and proving that democracy can work, try and find Republicans who are willing to do the right thing. But if they won't, at the end of the day, the Democrats have the vote. And so I'm confident that they're going to be able to figure these things out, and nothing turns around, a bad couple of news cycles like some progress, like getting some wins. And at the end of the day, the votes in Congress are what this is going to come down to.
Joe Zepecki, I never thought that the Democrats would get two infrastructure bills. One bite at the apple. I've said it many times. You can have the little bill and you can be bipartisan, or you can have the big bill, but you can't have them both. There's no plausible way, in my opinion, that the Republicans will let that happen. And, we've seen it in the handling of the debt ceiling. And the debt, of course, was run up under Donald Trump, just like every other prior president. So currently, the U.S. government has to decide, are they going to stand behind their full faith and credit? Are they going to pay the debts occurred under the Trump administration? And all indications are not a single Republican is willing to do that, Joe. And they say, stick it in your reconciliation bill. Well, that's the big bill. That's the $3.5 trillion bill. And there's not clear agreement, but in the meantime, during the course of this brinksmanship, the federal government could shut down. I see the Biden administration addressing the fact that they're preparing for the shutdown of the federal government, Joe. That's not going to be a good headline for Biden.
No, and there are cards left to play here. The Democrats in Congress and in the White House still have moves left to go. Listen, I can tell you, as somebody who was working at a federal agency under President Obama, one of the times that the clock was getting close to midnight and had, senior officials, around me trying to, work on the statement of what to tell our staff and our federal employees as they went home on a Friday because we didn't know if they would be coming back to work on Monday. This is a very real, issue at the moment for a lot of Americans. And it's only Thursday afternoon. Well, that's an eternity between now and, say, the end of the business day tomorrow. So I remain confident that at the end of the day, because they have the votes, Democrats are going to find a way to get this done. We have seen Democrats forced to prove over and over again that they are the responsible governing party, and they haven't let us down yet. So let's keep the faith. But if listeners are fired up about it, never a better 10 minutes of your day than talking to your members of Congress or their staff and giving them a piece of your mind.
But Joe Zepecki, Joe Manchin, and Kirsten Sinema to a lesser extent have managed to accomplish what Mitch McConnell threatened to do to Joe Biden. It's not really McConnell that's blocking the Biden agenda. It's in no small part Joe Manchin. And Manchin's already been very clear. I'm not down for $3.5 trillion. Bernie Sanders, who now heads up the budget committee, says, well, that's the basement, not the ceiling. So I mean, there will be some compromise within the party, I suspect, and they'll agree to, $2 trillion, or they'll take the original 1.5 trillion and add 2 trillion to that and say, well, we got 3.5 trillion. It just came through 2 legislative pieces. But ultimately, I'm not even sure if Joe Manchin's willing to sign off on that. And Joe, as you mentioned, a couple of victories for the Biden administration, for the American people, some deliverables. Well, that'd go a long way to improving Joe Biden's approval rating. But if Joe Manchin's not down, if they cannot deliver, Joe, this could be a disastrous time. This could effectively end the legislative agenda between now and the midterms.
First and foremost, when you're talking to Joe Zepecki about Joe Biden and Joe Manchin, there are way too many Joes
in
this conversation. So good luck keeping it all straight.
I'll call you biggest from now on, but please continue, sir.
But here's what I'll tell you. Senator Manchin wasn't gung-ho about the American Rescue Plan and had some very serious sticking points that between the president and Senator Schumer and even some Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Manchin was able to get what he considered some wins, taking that unemployment insurance from $400 a week to $300 a week, shortening the time horizon. And ultimately, because Senator Manchin wants President Biden to succeed, he found a way to get to yes. And I still think that at the end of the day, they're going to figure out a way to get this done. It may not be the full 3.5. Who knows what order these two bills are going to go before the bodies. And let's not forget, by the way, that 7 Republicans supported the infrastructure package in the U.S. Senate. So, there are ways to get this done, and we should not throw up our hands in despair quite yet. The Joes are on the case.
The glass is half full. It's only Thursday afternoon. I got Vegas Joe Zepecki with me. Devil's Advocates. We're going to have some fun today. Join us on the phones, 844-967-2789.
Vegas, baby, Vegas!
Why don't you give me half the money you were going to bet? Then we'll go out there, I'll kick you in the nuts, and we'll call it a day.
Have at it.
G.I. Joe.
You let him try violin because you love him. And if you love him that much, love him enough to make sure he's buckled up and in the back seat. Find out more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
600,000 Wisconsin families are receiving checks to help take care of their kids, thanks to the expanded child tax credit passed by Joe Biden and congressional Democrats. Ron Johnson voted against these checks for Wisconsin families, despite voting for a 2017 tax break that put more money into the pockets of millionaires like himself. It's time to vote Ron Johnson out of office. MoveOn.org political action, paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertisement. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
President Trump lost the election. Joe Biden won the election.
Collectively, Republicans got 1.661 million votes, 51,000 more votes than Trump got.
He exhausted his cases. He exhausted the court challenges.
All the Republicans voted for Trump the way they voted for the assembly candidates. He would have won.
It was not rigged. It was not stolen. Donald Trump lost the election. Joe Biden won the election. It's really clear.
This message was paid for by the People for People Corporation. Donate online at p4ppc.org.
Here's today's STEM tip. Don't throw out that old plastic bottle. Repurpose it by turning it into an awesome terrarium. Just fill it with sand, pebbles, soil, and your favorite plant. It'll grow sealed right in its own ecosystem. Learn more at She Can STEM. A message from the Ad Council.
The Devil's Advocates.
There are lots of people that haven't made up their mind on this race. And you think, how could that be? No, there are. There are a lot of people that could still make a decision all the way on election day down.
Undecided voters are the biggest idiots on the planet. Try giving short, simple answers.
Like you'll go person, woman, man, camera, TV. Yosemite.
Because freedom. The Devil's Advocates, making radio great again.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, the Thursday edition. I got a fine guest devil. He's Vegas Joe Zepecki, our good friend. He is a Dems strategist from Zepecki Communications right here in the great state of Wisconsin. Joe, appreciate you coming around today, man. Lightening the load, I hope. You know, because carrying Fancy Brian gets awfully heavy. Joe, I know you did the homework. I know you read the big Peril book, and I want to talk about that. And I want to save some time for that. We're gonna go there next, and I want to get your takeaways from the book because I haven't done my homework yet, Joe, and that's why I appreciate you answering the call. But let's linger on the polling for just a minute. CNN reports there's some bad polling out, relatively bad polling out for Joe Biden. New Gallup polling. Biden's job approval now sits at 43%. 53% disapprove of Joe Biden. That's -10, right, Joe? Just 3 months ago in June, Joe Biden was at 56% approval. And we've seen a steady decline throughout the course of the summer. By July, it was 50%. By August, it was 49%. And now we're down to 43%. That's a low number. And let's compare it with the former, the last and probably worst polling we've seen for a president at this stage of their career, Donald Trump. 37% at this very same stage in his career, Joe. Barack Obama was at 52% approval. George W. Bush at 51% approval at, about September of their first year in the White House. So perhaps, it's possible to overcome this bad momentum, but independents are really what's turning it. The partisans, the Republicans never liked Joe, never believed he was a legitimate president. And of course, the Democrats still overwhelmingly love them some Joe Biden. But it's the independents that swing the elections, isn't it, Joe?
It is, particularly in a state like Wisconsin, where it's always on a knife's edge, right? Where you have statewide elections routinely decided by fewer than 50,000 votes. Independents matter a great deal. And there is no doubt that, forgetting the actual moment we're in, just look at this period of time. There's a lot to be frustrated by when it comes to our politics and the ability of our government to deliver for the American people. So I think that's why, honestly, comparing like Trump and Biden numbers to Bush and even Obama numbers from 10 years ago, it's like apples and elephant carts, really. I mean, the media climate has changed so much and people are so frustrated that it is easiest when people see challenges in Washington and, playing politics with the debt limit and an inability to get anything done for voters who are frustrated to take it out on the president, whoever that is, regardless of party. And it doesn't mean that they're never going to change their mind. It doesn't mean you can tell today what those independent voters are going to do in the midterms next year, but it's just a reality of this moment in our politics that there's a lot to be frustrated about. And when you're the president of the United States and the buck stops with you, you're going to take the hit for it. And I think that's what we're seeing right now in these public opinion polls.
Joe, when I observed Donald Trump, I certainly didn't think he was a stable genius. Joe Biden, to the perception of the conservatives, the Trumpists, is something less than all there. And I've watched a lot of his speeches. I never found him to be super dynamic. I mean, there are better speech givers than Joe Biden, but ultimately I find him to be a very humane, a very empathetic human being. I think the American populace found him to be the right guy, especially with the pandemic going on, et cetera, et cetera. But Joe, when it's time to run for re-election, Joe Biden's going to be 82. And the American people, at least if you believe some alternative polling, let's call it some Republican polling from an agency like Rasmussen, the American people, by more than a majority, according to, again, Republican polling, don't think that Joe Biden's going to run for re-election. They don't think that this is Biden, preparing for a second term. They expect, or at least the polling expects, Kamala Harris to be the leader of the Democratic Party come 2024. Now, Joe, I know it's a little early for those sort of tea leaves, but From your perspective, has Joe Biden lost a step?
Compared to what? I mean, is Joe Biden the same guy today that he was 30 years ago? Of course not. Neither are you, and neither am I, right? Is this a guy who is, on the issues, knows the stuff, and knows how to work the levers of power in Washington? Absolutely. I mean, that's some of what we're going to get to. Is the book, Peril, actually is more about Biden than I think people expected it to be, right? And so you go inside the room when he's sitting down in the White House with 10 Republican senators who want to talk about the American Rescue Plan in late January, early February of 2021. And the meeting is supposed to go an hour, and it goes 2 hours. And Biden is engaged, and he wants to know where they can find agreement and where there's disagreements, and is getting into the issues and into the weeds. And that's the job. That's what he was elected to do. And so if people want to compare, every single American president's oratorical skills to, the actor in Independence Day, fine, be my guest. But I also think people understand that the whole job ain't just giving speeches, and we can cut a guy, who has literally the weight of the world on his shoulders and who is 78, 79 years old. They're going to cut him a little slack if they know that he's doing the job behind the scenes. And we know that he is. We know it more so than we knew it for the last 4 years with the former guy. And that, I think, at the end of the day, is what the American people care about. Yeah, Republicans are going to have their memes on Facebook and, say that he's too old, and that's fine. If they want to accuse every person over the age of 70 in this country of having dementia, I don't think that's going to go well. I think they're belittling senior citizens in a way that is going to have backlash against them. So be my guest.
I just felt like we as Democrats did the very same thing to Donald Trump. Everything from he's a narcissist to he's crazy to the fact he's infirm. I think they feel like it's turned about fair play. Not that Republicans ever needed fairness. Come back, Joe Zepecki, more devil's advocates.
I did what I came to do. I'm Satan reincarnated, and the buck stops with me.
You know what? I'll tell you something. There's nothing better than a hot sausage, a couple 2-3 cold beers, and Devil Radio on the box.
Chad's Design Build is proud to sponsor the Summer of Love on Devil Radio. We are committed to our community to demand better for each and every person. Doing the right thing isn't necessarily easy or inexpensive, but when we take the time to listen and learn, we can build a better community. Thoughtful remodeling is a lot like building an effective, progressive coalition. It takes patience, intelligence, and love. Experience helps too. Thank you, Joe Biden, and thank you, Devil Radio. On behalf of Chad's Design Build, here's to the Summer of Love.
This is Rocker. I'm sitting on the patio at Salvatore's Tomato Pies on East Wash, and I'm enjoying a floral-forward Manhattan called As Long as There's Whiskey. It features Rocker Rye whiskey with a hint of blueberry, a touch of smoky Amaro, and it's finished off with St. Germain. It's a Rocker Rye Manhattan at Sal's Tomato Pies on Livingston. Ask for it by name, As Long as There's Whiskey. You can also enjoy Rocker Spirits at the Wisco and Tiny's Tap on Willie Street. You must be 21. Please drink.
I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. There are new wildfire evacuations in Northern California around Redding. The wildfire started yesterday. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, approved new spending to prevent wildfires.
There's a $1.5 billion commitment to wildfire and forest management, vegetation management, prescribed burns. There are such things as good fires, notably. In fact, we're here. Another reason we're here to highlight that.
It's part of an effort to deal with climate change in California.
It's about tradition. It's about lifestyles. It's about memories, quite literally being wiped off the map.
Statewide, more than 9,000 firefighters remain assigned to 10 large active wildfires in California. Fires have burned more than 3,000 square miles this year, destroying more than 3,000 homes, commercial properties, and other structures. Those fires include 2 big forest fires growing in the heart of California's giant sequoia country on the western slope of the Sierra Nevada. I'm Ed Donahue.
Now that commission-free trading is the norm, it's time to rethink how we define value. Value is more than a price tag. It's the confidence of knowing you have a team of traders on standby to answer any question. It's thinkorswim's charting and analysis tools, and it's a personalized education to fine-tune your skills. Value is becoming smarter with every commission-free online equity trade. Discover true value with TD Ameritrade, where smart investors get smarter.
Dell's semi-annual sale is the perfect opportunity for a significant business upgrade. Save up to 45% on Dell computers built for business with Windows 10 Pro. Plus, enjoy special pricing on Dell docks, monitors, servers, and more, all with easy financing options through Dell Financial Services. Succeed anywhere with Windows 10 Pro. Speak to a Dell Technologies advisor today to find the right tech for your business with fast, free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Luke Mathers with your headlines. On Wednesday, the Wisconsin Supreme Court agreed to hear a case petitioned by conservatives for the High Court to address redistricting disputes in Wisconsin. The petition was accepted one day after a federal court scheduled a January deadline for a federal lawsuit on the same issue, creating parallel redistricting lawsuits in state and federal court. In accepting the case before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, conservative Justice Rebecca Bradley argued the state court should be the judicial body to hear redistricting disputes, despite federal courts being the body that adjudicated the map drawing process in recent decades of divided government in Wisconsin. Mostly sunny skies in the forecast today with winds up to 20 miles an hour and a high today of 69 degrees. Clear skies expected to continue into the evening with temperatures expected to drop to around 49 degrees. You're listening to Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM.
%60 of the time, they're right every time. Dom and Cruz are the Devil's Advocates.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. I got a fine guest devil this big hour, Joe Zepecki, Vegas Joe from Zepecki Communications. He is a fine Democratic, hey, where's that coming from? A fine Democratic strategist and a friend of ours. So thanks for coming around, Joe. And thanks for doing the homework. Thanks for reading the book. I bought the book. You know, I felt like I'd done my part. I'd get around to doing the homework later. But, you know, since I've got you, let's do a little deep dive on this book, Joe. And before we get into the Peril book, you know, it was 1 year ago today when a reporter asked Donald Trump, you know, would he be down for the peaceful transfer of power? And Trump really didn't give a straight answer. And in fact, Trump made a lot of implications that, yeah, only if it goes the way I want it to, really. And I think he showed his true colors, Joe. And I haven't read the book, but I've seen some of the prior teases and some of the reporting and the interviews with Costas and Woodward. But January 6th, you know, Joe, I knew it was a bad day, but I never knew the plan was in place. They had a plan. Eastman, the attorney for Donald Trump, had drawn up a plan. Now, claims it was a rough draft, but it was a rough draft for a coup d'etat, Joe. And I want to get your impression as you're reading the words, and you're not taking others' opinions for it, but you're reading the original words of the authors. What was your impression on the January 6th and the Mike Pence and the plan?
So one of the things that's very clear from reading the book is that there were multiple drafts, and basically this notion, you know, created out of thin air in violation of the 12th Amendment, that Vice President Pence's role is anything other than opening the envelopes and reading the cards, right? I mean, it's sort of a very Vanna White, you know, role that you have. And so in the days before January 6th, you have President Trump rushing back from, you know, he was away from the White House. Bannon tells him he's got to come back. They've got to get Mike Pence back from a ski vacation in Colorado. And so basically on like January 3rd, 4th, and 5th, they are having a series of meetings and they are fleshing out this proposal as they go. So it's already written down, suggesting that Pence has more authority than he really has. And then by the next day, the next time they meet, it's now a 7-point plan for how this will go. And that level of, intentionality and thinking about how to subvert the Constitution with no case law, to deny the will of the voters and to throw the country into chaos so that someone can hold on to the levers of power. There are very few words you can use to describe that, but the one that comes to mind really starts with a T. And so I don't have any insight into what, investigations are underway or how you hold accountable somebody who does something that out of step with American values. But there have to be consequences. There has to be accountability, not just for the person who put the pen to paper, but for the, people holding positions of public trust that allowed that to happen, and that, asked that drafter to push the conspiracy further and further along. This was not just one guy sitting, under the covers on his bed writing a note to himself. This was circulating at the highest levels of power in the American government. And that is incredibly scary to think about.
Joe, alleged former meth head Steve Bannon, and of course, he was a big shot in the Trump administration, helped Trump sort of, he was sort of the bridge after, what's his name, Manafort. Steve Bannon talked about killing the Biden presidency in the crib. What was your impression? I haven't read, just small excerpts I've seen in others reporting. What was your impression of Steve Bannon through the words of Woodward and Costa?
Well, you're exactly right. And so it's basically, that this is a sophisticated strategy to undermine the results of the election, because they have it game planned out, not just in the memo for how this should work between the vice president and the Senate, and then throwing it to the House of Representatives and 26 state delegations controlled by Republicans. They have clearly thought all of that through. And they have thought through the downstream effects of, even if their gambit fails and President Trump, in fact, leaves power, they know that a secondary outcome is that it's so that the mere act of attempting the coup undermines the validity of President Biden in the minds of millions and millions of Americans. And so, what's funny to me about Biden and Parscale and some of these other, Trump world figures who go from good standing with President Trump to they get too big for their britches and they get kicked to the curb, they always end up coming back, right? Because President Trump can't help himself. His network is really not that big of people he can rely on. And so even the people he throws overboard, he ends up going back to in this weird revolving door, looking for yes men and people who can feed his worst instincts. So it wasn't surprising to me to hear that Bannon popped up, or that Bannon, had other aims in mind beyond just stealing the election. He knew that there was a political benefit, even if, their efforts to steal it got stopped, which thankfully they did.
Joe, let's talk about other co-conspirators. At least that's how I would define them, above and beyond guys like Steve Bannon. Right here in the state of Wisconsin on January 5th, there were 15 Republicans that wrote a letter to Mike Pence, basically requesting that he set aside the electoral college outcomes. They'll give us more time to think it over, apparently, including State Senator Andre Jacques, who we may recall has been intubated with COVID for about a month, apparently out of the hospital now. But talk about, familiar figures. It's the same figures involved in the big lie and the propagation thereof are the same figures that are the anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers here in the state of Wisconsin. But above and beyond that, there were electors, including a guy who's on the Wisconsin Elections Commission, electors, alternative, false, fraudulent electors slated by these Republicans. And we were one of the 7 states, Joe, in the Eastman plan, the 7 states, they were going to question the certification of the outcomes. Well, this was a state they were going to object to. And we had Republican co-conspirators here more than willing to act as fraudulent electors. Joe, are they co-conspirators? And, assuming justice is ever done in this case, what about those guys?
So, candidly, those guys might as well be the angry guy on a stool at the end of the bar in this case. And what you get through reading Peril is that Senator Mike Lee from Utah, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina are two Republicans who are kind of doing the work. They're trying to talk sense into Trump and the small team around him, and they're doing the homework. They're saying, hey, you give me the names and we'll check them. You give me the evidence, we'll check it. You point me to a state that is going to appoint an alternate slate of electors, and we will, run the traps on it. But in their conversation, so like Senator Lee, for example, is calling people in Wisconsin and in Georgia and Arizona and Pennsylvania, and he cannot find a single Republican official who is going to tell him, we have already, chosen an alternate slate, or we're going to send an alternate slate. So the 15 Republican members of the legislature here in Wisconsin, they're just running their mouth. It has no weight of law, no force of action in something like the counting of electoral college votes, which is clearly spelled out in the Constitution and which there are processes around. So is it infuriating and really disappointing that people who hold positions of public trust in Wisconsin were shooting their mouth off in that way? Absolutely. I don't think that makes it actionable in a court of law. It sort of falls to the court of public opinion to hold those types of folks accountable at the ballot box, is my take on it.
Joe Zepecki, we've sort of joked on air here this week. The guardrail that perhaps saved the Republican was Dan Quayle. Quayle
potato,
pushed Mike Pence back from the brink. Mike Pence apparently feeling the pressure. The boss wanted him to do whatever he could, within the limits of the law or whatever, whatever you got to do, Mike. And it was Dan Quayle that said, listen to the parliamentarian. You got to do what you got to do, man. And what you got to do is what the law prescribes. Who would have ever thought that Dan Quayle would have been the savior of our republic, Joe?
Not me. And I also think there's another part of this that's worth exploring, though, which is this is really dangerous. It is un-American, and we should never come this close to a coup and an undermining of a free and fair election as we did ever again. That said, I don't think that we should assume that if Pence had gone the other way and Pence had done what was laid out in the Eastman memo, that the seventh part of the process, throwing it to the House of Representatives, would have automatically meant that all 26 delegations controlled by Republicans would have necessarily voted to keep President Trump in power. And that is one of the strengths of this system, is the checks and balances and the checks on the checks and the balances. We had 10 Republicans of good conscience who voted to impeach President Trump. When you have people like Liz Cheney, the Wyoming delegation is Republican controlled, she's an at-large. Well, all of a sudden that Republican state, if she decides I'm not going along with this, there were still checks and breaks in the system that might have held. That doesn't mean we don't need to reform the way this is done to make sure that there are even more in the future. But we shouldn't just assume that it was Dan Quayle, convincing Mike Pence to do the right thing. There were some other, safety mechanisms in place. At least I'd like to believe.
Well, Joe, how reassuring that there were other guardrails that might have held had this plan been executed with a little more competence. That's Vegas Joe Zepecki. He's my guest devil. He's done the homework. He read the book Peril. And Joe, I got to tell you, it's been troubling news. And Woodward obviously was a big part of the end of the Nixon presidency. Him and Bernstein wrote the exposés for the Washington Post that led to the exposure of Watergate and the eventual resignation of a president. Now, he could look at the proportionality, and I think he'd be a source with veracity on just how bad he thought this was. But Joe, let me ask you, this seems way worse than anything that I ever learned in history class. And why a guy like Dan Quayle didn't stand up, a guy like Mike Lee didn't stand up, a guy like Lindsey Graham didn't stand up and start shouting from the rooftops, this is wrong. It must end now. I mean, people of no character, people that want to, keep their levers of power. How do these men justify the fact that they didn't try to publicly bring attention to what the hell was going on here?
The only thing I can offer is that the human mind is an incredible muscle, maybe the most incredible in the world, and you can convince yourself and rationalize just about anything. And so I think what a lot of elected Republicans have done in the last 5 years is sort of said, listen, I'll go along to get along, I'll have my lines, but if I'm not here, the person that takes my place is going to be worse, and therefore they feel like, you know, they're better than the alternative. That's a scary proposition. I wish there were more courageous Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. But for the moment, there don't appear to be.
Joe Zepecki, he's my fine guest devil. He's better than the alternative, which would be me reading Peril aloud to you. Come back. We'll just ask Joe the questions. He read the book. He's Joe Zepecki. We're the Devil's Advocates. We'll be right back.
If you're not turned on to politics, politics will turn on you.
Reading is good.
If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that learning things never taught me nothing, and books is the worst.
And who's going to read 2,900 pages?
Hey, Wisconsin, this is Kirk Bankstad, and I own the Minocqua Brewing Company. Usually, I promote my progressive beer on this station, but today I wanted to promote these guys at Devil Radio. Devil Radio is the only progressive talk station in the state, and there are no less than 81 conservative talk stations in Wisconsin that spew crazy Trump cult rhetoric. While the Republicans have big pockets to fund these stations and manipulate Wisconsinites to vote against their own interests, Democrats have to rely on grassroots donations to get their message out. So I'm asking you to donate some money to these guys and keep them on the air. And I'm asking you to do it in September because every dollar you donate this month will be matched by an anonymous donor that cares about making Wisconsin a democracy again and knows that this radio station helps with that mission. So please donate today at devilradio927.com at the Support Devil Radio tab. Again, send some big bucks to devilradio927.com at the Support Devil Radio tab.
600,000 Wisconsin families are receiving checks to help take care of their kids thanks to the expanded child tax credit passed by Joe Biden and congressional Democrats. Ron Johnson voted against these checks for Wisconsin families despite voting for a 2017 tax break that put more money into the pockets of millionaires like himself. It's time to vote Ron Johnson out of office. MoveOn.org political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
My Congresswoman, Rep. Gwen Moore, over 100 Republicans signing on to that Texas lawsuit. What are your thoughts on your fellow Republicans in the House?
You know, honestly, this is what we all sign up for. This is a democracy. You run races. I've been involved in races where people lose, and I'm ashamed of the fact that we had one congressman, I guess he's brand new, who voted for this nonsense.
Listen to Devil's Advocates live weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m.
The Devil's Advocates, political commentary from the back of the class.
Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show. You know, it took a moment for that to sink in. What the hell is Fancy Brian doing over there? Now I get it. Because our little buddy, Joe Zepecki, he's my fine co-devil for the day, or at least for the hour. Joe did the homework. He read the book. He read Peril, the Woodward and Costa book. And apparently the former president, he started reacting. He doesn't have a Twitter, so he's putting out press releases through someone else who reposts them on Twitter. But Joe, I just want to briefly quote the former president. Some of this is pretty good. I won't even do the voice. Rhino former President George W. Bush, and he, not the letter, the W. Bush, and his flunky Karl Rove are endorsing warmongering and very low polling Liz Cheney. Bush is the one who got us into the quick stand of the Middle East. And after spending trillions of dollars and killing nearly 1 million people, the Middle East was left in far worse shape after 21 years than it was when we started. His stupidity, Trump wrote. It gets better. Trump raged against even his own party, then turned his complaints to the media, saying they've seen evidence of election fraud, even though he went on to say such evidence was, not yet public. Why is the fake news media continuing on their path of saying baseless and disproven lies concerning the presidential election of 2020? No matter how much evidence they see, Trump wondered, even though his lies of election fraud have been thoroughly debunked. Well, don't tell Wisconsin Republicans that. The proof is massive and staggering. The presidential election of 2020 was rigged. When the information becomes public, well, you can't have it both ways, Trump. When the information becomes public, people will see that it wasn't even close. Trump predicted, even though he offered no such information. It was then time for GOP senators to share the hot seat. So here's when he turn the circling firing squad on Mike Lee and Lindsey Graham. A little bit more. I spent virtually no time with Senators Mike Lee of Utah or Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Lindsey Graham's one of your favorite golfing buddies, dude. Talking about the 2020 election scam, or is viewed by many the crime of the century. That's a new one. Lindsey and Mike should be ashamed of themselves for not putting up the fight necessary to win. Trump said of his failed coup attempt. Mike Lee, Lindsey Graham, and all the other Republicans who were unwilling to fight for the presidency of the United States, which would have included at least an additional 4 Republican senators, 2 in Georgia, 1 in Michigan, 1 in Arizona, are letting the Democrats get away with the greatest election host in history, a total con job. So anyways.
Just aim higher.
So, I got to jump in here because one of the things I wanted to mention was what I found to be the funniest part of the book is it is very clear that Senator Lindsey Graham is one of the sources for Costa and Woodward. They don't name any of them, but it's so clear that it is Senator Graham trying to rehabilitate his image and talk about all this advice he gave President Trump about how to position himself for 2024, and people love your policies. It's just your behavior. And the line that I think literally had me sort of chuckle out loud was reporting that Trump was so happy to be off Twitter that, it's wonderful. I've got all this extra time to do work during the day. And I just had to laugh because it's about the most absurd thing you can imagine President Trump saying, particularly when you read any of the statements that he puts out through his Save America PAC. And it rings so much like your really good friend who their boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with them, and it just breaks their heart. But they try to put on a brave face and be like, no, I'm better off without them. You're like, no, you're full of it. Like you needed that person just like Donald Trump needs Twitter.
Folks, that's Joe Zepecki. You can be a part of this big program. Just call us and ask any of your questions about the big book, Peril. Joe's got all the answers, or at least he claims. 844-967-2789. One of our favored. Mark from the SAC. Welcome back, Mark. Say hi to Joe Zepecki.
Hey, Joe. Glad to have you, sitting alongside Crute there on the air. That it's just disgusting to me that these guys, are even showing their faces now, because if they knew that this was going on, that there was an attempt to overturn the election of the United States, and they're trying to cover their bases with their base. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden won the election. There was no election fraud, and rather than coming out and actually showing some intestinal fortitude to do this, which they're bound by oath to actually do. I mean, they're bound by oath to support uphold the Constitution of the United States, like all our federally elected officials and our state officials are bound to do by oath of office, invoking God in the process, because they're also godly now. That there should be no excuses for this stuff. I mean, that, oh, we're trying to mollify Trump. No, there's no mollifying the man. The man lost. And that because you did not step up and say something, that we came within a hair's breadth of losing the republic to a gang of terrorists and installing a dictator. And
I'm going to cut you short, Mark. Others want to get in, and I want Joe to have a moment to respond. Joe, Kevin McCarthy comes to mind, and I did read some excerpts. Trump still hates Kevin McCarthy's ass. And Kevin McCarthy was someone that came up really on the day of the January 6th insurrection and showed a little bit of backbone. But of course, subsequently, he's gone down to Mar-a-Lago and he's kissed the ring in his ass and gone to Bedminster. And Trump still doesn't like his ass. So, your thoughts, Joe.
Yeah, we should not forget the things that happened on that day and how close we came. But we also shouldn't forget the little details of it and the color, including things like Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell saying, pretty explicitly, President Trump is accountable and responsible for the behavior of this riotous insurrectionist mob that stormed the Capitol. And then turned around and changed their tune because they didn't want to get the mean tweets or get crosswise with Trump voters. They, for a moment in time, they spoke the truth. We call it a Kinsey gaffe in politics, where a politician is caught saying the truth, and then they had to retreat from that. And we shouldn't let any Republican who did that get away with it. Those words should haunt them for the rest of their careers.
Joe, we're about out of time for this hour, but the January 6th commission in the Congress, they're hoping in the spring, and they're hoping to rapidly roll out subpoenas. Do you think this will help advance the issue for the American people and get to the truth?
I hope so. There are some very serious people involved in this. Former Congressman Denver Riggleman, who I know has a lot of experience with sort of using cellular data to track the movements of folks and has some theories about this. So they're taking it seriously. I expect we'll see subpoenas very soon. And I know the spring seems like a long time to wait, but we're going to get the answers. We just have to trust this bipartisan group to get it done right.
Joe Zepecki, he's the president of the Devil's Advocates Book Club. Thank you, Joe. We'll talk soon. More Devil's Advocates Hour Tuesdays.
When people try to sell books, they do all sorts of interesting, exotic things.
The ladybugs.
Nobody did what I've done.
I would really question somebody's judgment if they couldn't figure this out.
Oh, it looks good on you, though.
Hey, Joanne, I hear you have a Tech Protect plan from Community PC.
I have been having services since 2013. He provides monthly maintenance for me. He is able to attach to my computer so he can figure out what my problems are. I'm very computer illiterate. If I had to call somebody on the telephone, I would probably not be able to follow through with that.
Community PC. We know what makes seniors happy.
Welcome to Family Feud on Max Inc. Radio. I'm your host, Rob Roberts. Rocker, we asked 100 Madisonians, what is the favorite part of Max Inc. Radio?
Oh, that's easy, Rob. Live music performed in the Devil's Lair every Saturday night.
The survey says, oh, number 2. So close, Rocker. Jimmy K, for the win. What is your favorite part of Max Inc. Radio?
Local music.
That's right, Jimmy. Listen to local music every Saturday from 6 p.m. to midnight on Devil Radio 92.7 FM.
You're listening to WTTN 1580 AM Columbus and W224 EG 92.7 FM Madison. Always streaming on the Devil Radio app.
AP News. I'm Ed Donahue. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says there is an agreement between the White House, the House, and the Senate on President Biden's big $3.5 trillion plan. This is Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
We certainly think it's progress, and it builds on the president's meetings he had yesterday with leadership, with moderates, with progressives to talk about the path forward.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says Democrats are creating a debt crisis.
Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the House. They want to raise $5 trillion and spend in the next month. You have a maxed out credit card, and they want to get a new limit to go max out another one.
Moderate Democrats have demanded that the $3.5 trillion price tag be reduced. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky says the priority remains getting people vaccinated.
We remain committed to continuing our robust efforts to vaccinate as many people as possible here in America and around the world.
Walensky spoke to advisors as the country gets a step closer to offering booster doses of Pfizer's vaccine to seniors and others at high risk from the coronavirus. The House has overwhelmingly passed legislation to provide funding for Israel's missile defense system. The camp where almost 15,000 migrants had waited along the Texas border just days ago was dramatically smaller today, while across the river in Mexico, Haitian migrants in a growing camp awoke surrounded by security forces as a helicopter thundered overhead. As the Boy Scouts of America moves through its complex bankruptcy case, it's encountering criticism from major religious groups that help it run thousands of scout units. The churches fear an eventual settlement could leave many of them unprotected. The Boy Scouts sought bankruptcy protection last year to halt individual lawsuits and create a compensation fund for thousands of men who claim they were molested as youngsters by Scout leaders. This is AP News.
Now that commission-free trading is the norm, it's time to rethink how we define value. Value is more than a price tag. It's the confidence of knowing you have a team of traders on standby to answer any question. It's thinkorswim's charting and analysis tools, and it's a personalized education to fine-tune your skills. Value is becoming smarter with every commission-free online equity trade. Discover true value with TD Ameritrade, where smart investors get smarter.
Dell's semi-annual sale is the perfect opportunity for a significant business upgrade. Save up to 45% on Dell computers built for business with Windows 10 Pro. Plus, enjoy special pricing on Dell docks, monitors, servers, and more, all with easy financing options through Dell Financial Services. Succeed anywhere with Windows 10 Pro. Speak to a Dell Technologies advisor today to find the right tech for your business with fast, free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
At Crazy Lenny's e-bikes, my store, we have solid e-bikes with 4 power levels, 7 speeds for just $844, or we have the best-selling e-bike designed for Madison bike trails, 5 power settings with throttle or center drive, 35-mile range, complete comfort, spring-loaded seats, soft front adjustable shocks, a $2,000 e-bike, $600 off, just $1,400.
The largest selection in North America, 200 e-bikes on display. I've seen them
at Crazy Lenny's e-bikes.
President Trump lost the election. Joe Biden won the election.
Collectively, Republicans got 1.661 million votes, 51,000 more votes than Trump got.
He exhausted his cases. He exhausted the court challenges.
All the Republicans voted for Trump the way they voted for the assembly candidates. He would have won.
It was not rigged. It was not stolen. Donald Trump lost the election. Joe Biden won the election. It's really clear.
This message was paid for by the People for People Corporation. Donate online at p4ppc.org.
Hey, Dom, how many palindromes can you name in 30 seconds?
Race car, mom, dad, reefer, kayak, level. Did I say mom already?
You're forgetting one really important one.
Zero res.
Not only is it the coolest palindrome ever, it's also our favorite.
Right, I remember. Why is that again?
They advertise with us.
Zero res, my favorite palindrome.
And carpet cleaner.
Get
the best carpet cleaning ever. Schedule your carpet cleaning online at zeroresmadison.com. Tell them the Devil's Advocate sent you. Atlantis Valley Foods, located in Cottage Grove, is currently looking for experienced road drivers, Monday through Friday, to deliver and stock fresh food and beverages in our micro markets across southern Wisconsin. This position offers health insurance, 401k, and paid time off. Pay ranges from $700 to $800 per week based on experience. Stop in and fill out an application or submit a resume at sales@atlantisvalley.com.
For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. I'm Luke Mathers with your headlines. A contractor the state of Wisconsin hired to ensure COVID-19 testing capabilities in Wisconsin schools is facing questions from a number of school districts, with some districts dropping the California-based company after a bumpy rollout of the program. The Department of Health Services acknowledged the complaints that were submitted, but did not elaborate what was being done to address the issues. Wage growth in Wisconsin over this past summer ranked in the bottom 10 of states across the country, according to newly released data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Private sector hourly wages grew an average of 2.4% compared to the previous summer months, ranking Wisconsin 42nd in rate increases seen around the country. According to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, only 5% of intensive care unit beds are available across the state due to the contagious Delta COVID-19 variant surging in Wisconsin. You're listening to Devil Radio.
Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the heart of liberal Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Best friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Now here are your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, the Thursday edition, hour 2. And I've been joined here in the broadcast bunker 2.0 by a fine guest. He is pollster extraordinaire and our good friend Charles Franklin from the Marquette University Law School poll. Charles, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Thanks for making the trip. I understand we're the special ones. You made the trip into the studio. Well, you know, you've had 2 days worth of polling, and I can't wait to get caught up on all this. And let's start with today's polling first, if we could. Joe Biden, one of the big topics, and this is not Wisconsin polling per se. This is national polling.
Right. This is a national poll, 1,400 people.
1,400 people, national poll. And what are the people saying about Joe Biden in the current sense?
Yeah. In his overall job approval, he's at 48% approve, 52 disapprove. That's down 10 points from where we had him in July. The month of August was dominated by news about Afghanistan that was almost all negative towards Biden. And that clearly has had an effect on his approval rating. On specifically how he's handled the withdrawal from Afghanistan, just 36% approve, 63 disapprove. So you can really see how much of it he's taken that on the chin. There is some better news for him, though, and that is his approval rating on handling COVID is still well above water, 56% approve on COVID. So it's clear that he's in a worse position now than he was 7 weeks, 8 weeks ago, and especially so on Afghanistan. But his overall numbers, he's now a net -4 in this poll. He's also a net -4 in the polling averages right now. And that's certainly worse than when he went into the month of July, when he was well above water.
Now, let's compare Donald Trump. Did you do national polling on Trump at a similar point in his career? I've seen some Gallup, but I'd rather know about the Marquette polling.
Well, the Marquette polling here in the state, and we did do some national polling, which ran in line with most of the other national polls. Trump was in the low 40s almost from the beginning of his presidency, and really varied from a few periods in time when he fell as low as the high 30s. And at no point did he get up as high as 50% approval. So Trump is consistently a bit below where Biden has been. And if you take our reading right now, Biden's doing better. There are some national polls that have him doing a little bit worse than Trump at this point in Trump's first year. And a lot of this is driven by partisanship.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I know that Donald Trump was highly unpopular amongst Democrats and very popular within the context of the Republicans. Are we seeing a flip of that sort of electorate coin now?
Yeah, very much so. And there are a couple of things. One is the opposite party gave Trump less than a 10-point approval rating among Democrats, and Republicans have given Biden typically less than 10 points from them. Occasionally a little bit higher, but not much higher. On the other hand, Trump was rarely below about 85% approval among Republicans. Until this month, Biden has been over 90%, typically 93 to 96% with Democrats. And so what you've got are the two big party groups, equally and oppositely nearly unanimous. And that leaves the pure independents in the middle to sort of swing back and forth. And they do carry a bit of a balance in the shifts in Biden's approval right now. And in fact, went from about 57% approval in July to about 57% disapproval now. And so that also has contributed to Biden's fall off in the last 2 months.
Well, that's a big swing amongst independents, obviously. And the true independents, as you describe them, they're the ones that determine the outcome of elections.
When we have elections that are being decided by 2 or 3 points,
sure,
independents who in national polling make up somewhere between 15 and 18% of the electorate, I'm sorry, of all adults. It's a little smaller than that because they also don't turn out to vote as often. So let's call them 10 to 14 points in the national electorate. Swinging them by 5 or 10 points can be an important issue as we come up, especially to the 2022 elections. Let's not look so far ahead as 2024.
Well, I won't look so far ahead. The Afghanistan, the polling, at least as I understand it, from the new Marquette University Law School poll in a 2-day national poll, or at least a 2-day rollout of the polling here. We got a fine pollster with us. He's Charles Franklin. Charles, I agree with the poll in this regard. I agree with the sentiment. Let's withdraw from Afghanistan. I personally do. But if you ask me, how do you handle the execution of the withdrawal? I would have said, yeah, it was a mess. And I think that's similar to what the broader polling finds.
I think that's exactly what the polling finds. And the trick here is to appreciate that the public's view of how we withdrew, the messiness of it, and all of the things that we saw from that, people are pretty negative about that. But in the same poll that has Biden's approval at 36 on the withdrawal has 3/4, 75% who say it was the right thing to pull the troops out. Only 1/4 think we should leave troops in Afghanistan. Likewise, 75, 74% say the war there was not worth it. And so I think the conclusion I take away from this is that in the long run, Biden has achieved the goals that the public is saying, at least at the moment, that they support. Let's end this long war. Let's not leave any troops there. But he's paying a real price for the perception that the way we withdrew was not well handled. I think in the longer run, being out of that situation is probably better. And it certainly reflects public sentiment that we'd been there long enough.
Charles Franklin, we noted during the course of the Afghanistan withdrawal that listenership was up significantly. People were very engaged. And I know you try to poll the engagement level of your sample. What can you tell us about the engagement of these people you polled?
Yeah, well, first of all, people seem to be paying attention. We found pretty high levels of attention to Afghanistan. On the other hand, it's not completely universal and probably needs to be appreciated that, we were there for 20 years. And during a lot of that time, you would have had to search high and low for news coverage of what was happening in Afghanistan 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even 15 years ago. And so this is an issue that has only been episodically in the public mind. If we go back to 2014, Barack Obama tried to reduce troops significantly there and ran into a bit of a firestorm over how many troops to withdraw, how many to leave. And this became an important issue for about 4 months. And then you search high and low to find more attention to it for the next number of years. A couple of years ago, Donald Trump announced that we were withdrawing and that he was reaching an agreement with the Taliban for our withdrawal. Well, that got an hour's worth of coverage, I'd say, and pretty quickly faded from the public awareness to the point that now I don't think that we've had very much explanation about what role President Trump played in ending what he called endless wars, and what role President Biden played in actually making that end happen. And so the context and the understanding of what really has been going on and who has done what, and whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to do, that sort of material is something that's not on the top of most people's minds. It comes up episodically and then it goes away.
Charles, probably going to be difficult for you to, well, let's stick to the ones I know you can answer. Obviously, the withdrawal of Afghanistan has left refugees. And we've got this, let's call it a refugee admittance problem, in that there's some conflict. Some want, if we're going to withdraw, we've got to bring our allies here. And obviously, right here in our great state, in the great state of Wisconsin, there are thousands of Afghani refugees at Fort McCoy. Here's my question. Of the people polled in this new national polling you've rolled out, what is the attitude about refugee admittance?
Right. Solid majority, 58% say we should admit as many Afghan refugees as possible, leaving about 42% who say that they're not in favor of that. This was, of course, one of the criticisms of the way that Biden withdrew, was the criticism of, was he protecting Afghans who had worked with us, and I think by implication, getting them out of the country. Well, what we come away with is that there is a sizable majority that thinks we should admit these refugees. But whereas majorities across all three partisan groups agree that we should have pulled all of our troops out, there is a pretty sizable partisan split on the refugee issue. Only 36% of Republicans think we should admit as many Afghan refugees as possible. 64% are opposed to that. But among independents, it's 58 in favor, and among Democrats, 78 in favor. So here, once more, you see the partisan split, that it's useful to criticize Biden for not protecting our allies there and getting them out of the country. But when it becomes a question of, should we bring them into this country, then you see a pretty sizable party difference there.
Well, Charles Franklin, I won't ask you and expect an answer on the air, but I'm wondering who's shaping the narrative. You know what I mean? Is it the media, or is it the chicken or the egg first? He's a fine pollster. I don't know if he can answer that one, though. He's Charles Franklin, Marquette University Law School poll. You are listening to the Devil's Advocates. We'll come back with Charles.
Did you ask me a question?
Myself, the boy, 2 droids, and no questions asked.
Mike, that's a very good question.
My neighbors have different opinions about COVID-19 vaccines. Getting vaccinated is your choice. No one can make your mind up for you. Talk to your healthcare provider about your questions and go to getvaccineanswers.org for the latest information. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
600,000 Wisconsin families are receiving checks to help take care of their kids thanks to the expanded child tax credit passed by Joe Biden and congressional Democrats. Ron Johnson voted against these checks for Wisconsin families, despite voting for a 2017 tax break that put more money into the pockets of millionaires like himself. It's time to vote Ron Johnson out of office. MoveOn.org political action, paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
President Trump lost the election. Joe Biden won the election.
Collectively, Republicans got 1.661 million votes, 51,000 more votes than Trump got.
He exhausted his cases. He exhausted the court challenges.
All the Republicans voted for Trump the way they voted for the assembly candidates, and he would have won.
It was not rigged. It was not stolen. Donald Trump lost the election. Joe Biden won the election. It's really clear.
This message was paid for by the People for People Corporation. Donate online at p4ppc.org.
My mother was very familiar with her neighborhood, but one day she stopped at the stop sign and she wasn't even really sure where she was at.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's.
Now is the time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
I'm not down for voter suppression in my
No,
state.
right. This. It's got to be easy. It was great to have these options. We should have these options. We should have days off for people to go vote. We should expand the availability, the ease of our own citizens in this country to participate in self-governance. Republicans, why are you so opposed to that?
Because they lose those elections.
Listen to Devil's Advocates weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m.
I know things are getting tougher when you can't get the top off the bottom of the barrel.
The Devil's Advocates, the fix for political junkies everywhere.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. I got a fine pollster right here with me. He's Charles Franklin, Marquette University Law School poll. And for the last 2 days, Charles has been dropping some polling, and we've been going inside the numbers. I appreciate you sticking around, sir. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I have wondered aloud to you, sir, and I know there's no way to know for sure from the polling, but I guess I will ask, does the narrative get created by the media apparatus of the partisan left or right, as the case may be? You talk about 36% of all people oppose refugee admittance, but that's primarily Republicans. And that narrative isn't part of the Republican narrative until we hear it on Fox News. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg, Charles?
Well, the partisanship comes first. Let's do that. That people do think of themselves as Democrats or Republicans, and those are pretty important things to their identity. But then when an issue comes up, people look for their trusted party leaders to tell them what to think about it. Now, we don't usually admit that we're influenced that much by our party leaders, but when Donald Trump suddenly decided that the Republican Party should be anti-free trade, the party shifted in his direction really pretty quickly. The media plays a big role in that by being the conduit through which we see things, and certainly the modern media is much more opinionated, much more within partisan camps. So your Fox viewers are being influenced by Fox, but they're also going to Fox because they know that they will hear messages that are good for them, that are comforting for them. So I agree it's a chicken and an egg, but I think party leadership and opinion leadership that comes from partisan sources is a very important thing of politics generally. And very few of us want to hear that our side is not doing the right thing. And if we only listen to our side, guess what? They don't say, oh yeah, guys, we screwed this one up. We're mea culpa on this.
Well, of course, I was chastising Republicans in this case, but the flip side, perhaps, the Texas abortion ban. And you did some polling on the U.S. Supreme Court, current perceptions of the court. And that number has changed dramatically since we last talked about court polling. And of course, what significant issues were on the horizon? Well, the question of abortion and the way the U.S. Supreme Court failed to stay a Texas abortion ban effectively. And people reacted. And I would say, while those that oppose abortion probably didn't increase, those that opposed abortion already opposed abortion. They got what they wanted, right? Or at least that's the perception. But those that are in favor of reproductive rights, they probably saw their opinion of the court shaded. Is that what the polling found?
Yeah, we saw a substantial drop. 60% approved of the job the court was doing in our July poll. That has fallen to 49% now, 50% disapprove. The first time in our polling that we've seen the court underwater on approval. And that comes right on the aftermath of two decisions in which the court reversed Biden policies, and most importantly, let the Texas abortion law go into effect. That we saw this big drop among Democrats from about 59% approval to 37% approval, a 22-point drop. But we also saw about a 10 or 11-point drop among independents. Republicans just slightly more positive to the court, up 4 points to 61. So what you're seeing is this is a case where I would say the real world event of what the court did, especially with respect to the Texas law, had an impact on how people saw the court. This came after a year in which the court offered a lot of decisions that had pretty big majorities, 9-0, 8-1, only a few that were really 6-3 liberal versus conservative. Now, at the end of the court term, the court did hand down a couple of 6-3 decisions that were strictly along ideological and party lines, and those did get some attention. But in July, the public by and large wasn't really negative to the court. But now after this month of August, and especially this Texas case, you've seen a real shift in how Democrats, but also independents, are seeing the court.
He's Charles Franklin. He's a pollster extraordinaire. And Charles, I saw your new polling reported out in the Washington Post earlier today. And it was a compilation article. It talked about your polling and some new Gallup polling. And I'm sorry if I'm confusing who said what in their recent poll, but the topic was the U.S. Supreme Court. And the question was, how likely is it that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned? And Charles, I don't mean to accuse you if this isn't your poll, but the vast majority, or at least the plurality of people, have no idea how close this issue might be to changing, flipping. Charles, can you speak to that?
Yeah, that was not my poll, but it
my
does.
bad.
Yeah, not mine. No, but it does reflect how people expect the court to act, but whether folks are really well informed about where the court is on this is a big deal. In our poll, we asked, should Roe be overturned? Yeah. Only 20% thought it should be, 50% said not. Interestingly, 29% said they didn't know what they thought about this issue. But the balance there of strong support for keeping Roe is clear in our data. It's clear in practically every poll that's been done. Where things become messier, though, is, and we've seen this for 30 years on abortion, people want abortion to be legal in general, but are willing to accept a variety of restrictions on it. And we're going to see the court hear a case in December from Mississippi that will ban abortions after 15 weeks. That's a substantial reduction in time, shortening of the time span. There, we saw a plurality. About 40% would support that law. 34% were opposed to it. On the other hand, when we asked about the 6-week ban in Texas, we went back to a large plurality. 46% would strike down that law. So the nature of the restrictions on abortion matter a lot.
Thank you, Charles Franklin, pollster extraordinaire, Marquette University Law School poll. That's why they wouldn't let me in there, Charles. Thank you so much. More devil's advocates.
Just one more thing.
What's your prediction? Prediction? Yes, prediction.
Hey.
Unlike the legislative Republicans, 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM are working through the pandemic to keep you informed. Streaming 24/7 at DARNWI.com.
Hi, this is Brad from Zero Res. If you need someone to help with your carpet cleaning, business or residence, please give us a call. We have the best system available and an amazing team of friendly technicians. Call us at 848-9000 or schedule online at zeroresmadison.com.
This is Chad Spate. Are you thinking about improving or expanding your home? At Chad's Design Build, we're committed to making your home comfortable, healthy, attractive, durable, and sustainable. In fact, those commitments spell our name. And we deliver these services with our outstanding team of professionals who will respect you and your home. Visit our website at chadsdesignbuild.com to learn more about how we are building a better world, one remodeled home at a time.
Stream Progressive News and Talk 24/7, as well as download exclusive podcasts and interviews at devilradio927.com. That's devilradio927.com.
Coronavirus update. I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. Stocks finished higher, the Dow up 506 points. A CDC advisory panel is backing Pfizer's coronavirus booster shots for millions of older or otherwise vulnerable Americans. The Delta variant may be disrupting the recovery of the jobs market. Here's the AP's Sandra Magani.
For a second straight week, more Americans filed for jobless aid. The number ticked up by 16,000 from a week earlier to 351,000. Hiring has been up sharply this year, and the economy's recovered about 17 million of the 22 million jobs slashed 18 months ago. But employers added far fewer jobs than expected last month as the Delta variant surged. Sagar Magani, Washington.
A Kansas education official says a middle school student has died of the coronavirus, the first reported death of someone ages 10 to 17 in Kansas, only the third reported for someone under 18. I'm Ed Donahue.
Now that commission-free trading is the norm, it's time to rethink how we define value. Value is more than a price tag. It's the confidence of knowing you have a team of traders on standby to answer any question. It's thinkorswim's charting and analysis tools, and it's a personalized education to fine-tune your skills. Value is becoming smarter with every commission-free online equity trade. Discover true value with TD Ameritrade, where smart investors get smarter.
Dell's semi-annual sale is the perfect opportunity for a significant business upgrade. Save up to 45% on Dell computers built for business with Windows 10 Pro. Plus, enjoy special pricing on Dell docks, monitors, servers, and more, all with easy financing options through Dell Financial Services. Succeed anywhere with Windows 10 Pro. Speak to a Dell Technologies advisor today to find the right tech for your business with fast, free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Luke Mathers with your headlines. On Wednesday, 2 Afghan men being processed for refugee status at Fort McCoy were charged with unrelated crimes while on the military base in western Wisconsin. One of the men is charged with assaulting his wife, and the other is charged with multiple accounts of assault, including the charge of engaging in a sexual act with a minor. The men are being held in the Dane County Jail, according to the Wisconsin Department of Justice. As of Wednesday, officials from Fort McCoy announced a total of 7 Afghan refugees had been infected with measles, but all 7 cases have since recovered. Beginning last Thursday, officials on the military base enacted a mass vaccination campaign of Afghan refugees against contagious diseases, including measles, mumps, and chickenpox. Mostly sunny skies in the forecast today with winds up to 20 miles an hour and a high today of 69 degrees. Clear skies expected to continue into the evening with temperatures expected to drop to around 49 degrees. You're listening to Devil Radio.
The Devil's Advocates, radio for the 99%.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, the Thursday edition. Thank you to our fine guest, Charles Franklin. He's always appreciated when he comes around, and you know he is the polling guy here in the state of Wisconsin. He is the gold standard. We appreciate when he's doing some national polling, and you know we can share with our national audience. We do. And Charles informs me the next Wisconsin polling coming down the pike will be about 1 year out from the election. First week of November, I guarantee Charles Franklin will be back in the hot seat. We'll be going over all the big numbers here.
That'll be interesting. I want to know if it lines up with the Mandela polling that he's been releasing.
Well, here in the state of Wisconsin, of course, the U.S. Senate race is perhaps the most closely watched in that there's 10 or more candidates. And the current Lieutenant Governor, Mandela Barnes, you know, dropped some internal polling that shows he's doing pretty well, like 38%, if I understood correctly. And of course, as your soon-to-be show partner, Luke, pointed out to me, well, you know, even in his internal polling, that means like 63% aren't supporting the guy. And this is his campaign polling. So, you know, that's a lot of undecided voters. Your thought, though?
Oh, I was going to say he also released that he's already tied with Ron Johnson if they were to go against to each other head to head.
But the problem with that polling, and, you know, I appreciate it's a campaign and, you know, whatever advantage you can take during the campaign cycle, you take it. And if you got some polling that says your candidate's even with the incumbent, and obviously being even with the incumbent a year out, it's a good thing. But Russ Feingold was always ahead of the incumbent, Ron Johnson. until it was election day and Ron won re-election.
Yeah, I just want to see, because Marquette's been pretty all right.
I'm a little concerned that our pal Charles, and this is not predicated on a conversation today, but on prior conversations, as this field of candidates has grown, it's hard to predict, because, you know, you start getting to 10 candidates, the sample sizes get so small. You know, you've so delineated the sample. You know, if 10 people like one candidate, well, that's going to seem like a high percentage of support, but relatively speaking, it's an incredibly small sample. So here's my fear. We're not going to get any accurate polling data on the U.S. Senate race. We're going to have to assume that this candidate's internal polling is relatively accurate. And right now, Mandela gets to claim he's the front runner, and no one's got internal polling to contradict.
I thought he was the front runner in the first place. I just thought it was, you know, interesting. They have polling. I mean, again, you got to use the polling you have and everything like that. I'm more interested to see if it'll line up with Charles and how his poll work out.
Well, see how it's going in a couple months. Of course, we do have a declared gubernatorial candidate, both the Democratic incumbent governor, Tony Evers, and we've got a well-known Republican who's thrown her hat into the race, Rebecca Clayfish, apparently suffering through COVID currently, although vaccinated, a breakthrough case. Home with Fancy, her dog.
Hanging out with Fancy. And I want to know the age of that dog, because if it's less than 4, it's definitely named after me.
You know, Joel Clayfish knows that we call you Fancy.
I know, that's my point. Like, what he worked at the station the same time. I produced his show, and he made me delicious food. It's not like we don't have an antagonistic relationship whatsoever. Nice dude, made me food, wears camo, good guy.
And you think perhaps the Clayfish family dog, the first dog of the perhaps future Republican governor household of the state of Wisconsin, is named after you?
Well, you know what? It's not that far of a stretch. That's all I'm saying. It's a possibility. It's a thought that occurred to me in my mind.
You're so vain, Fancy.
And you know, if it's an opinion that comes to my mind, we know it's fact.
844-967-2789. If you just say it enough times on the radio, it becomes a fact. The fact is, Joel and Rebecca Clayfish named their dog after Fancy Brian Kelly.
I heard people talking about it.
They're saying it on the radio.
They're saying it right on the radio.
844-967-2789. Your rampant speculation, always welcome here. Andy from Beaver Dam, welcome back. What do you got for us?
Well, no offense to Brian, but I hope that dog never makes it into the mansion out there on Lake Mendota, because that would be bad news. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, I'm down here in Matt City with I had a doctor's appointment, and I'm beelining for Barnes & Noble so that I can get the Woodward book, and then I'll be more well-versed when I call in as to what the truth was about Mr. Trump and other assorted people. And so I don't know. I mean, as long as I'm down here, I might as well pick it up, right?
Yeah, I would say yes, but our good friend, former U.S. attorney and frequent guest on this big show, James Santel, would ask you, are you also picking up a copy of the Mueller report?
The Mueller report, is that actually, well, yeah, you can buy a copy of that
Oh,
somewhere?
absolutely. It's required reading, according to our friend, former U.S. attorney, James Santel.
Wow. I would have never guessed.
Well, start with Peril, and once you get done with the Peril book, then I'm holding you accountable to reading the Mueller report.
Go in and get the prequel, as it were.
Right. We're going to do Woodward first, and then we'll go on to the Mueller report, and then we'll know everything that you have to know about, is if, at this point, we hope we never have to worry about Mr. Trump again,
Oh, you absolutely do, though, Andy. In fact, Newsmax, and that's a very partisan source of the right, Andy. Newsmax, looking at new Rasmussen polling today, is talking about a probable electoral landslide for Donald Trump in his rematch, and probably not against Joe Biden. The new polling from Rasmussen today say 54% of the American people don't think Joe Biden will actually run for re-election, Andy. They think it's going to be Kamala. And, Joe Biden would be 82 in 2024. Maybe it's a little too early to look that far ahead, but I can understand why the American people would question whether or not Joe Biden's still going to have gas in the tank as a 82, 83, 84, 85-year-old U.S. president. I'm just saying, maybe it won't be Joe Biden, but I think almost assuredly Donald Trump's running.
Oh yeah, he's running no matter what. It's the best way he can. It's the best way he can think of to make money. All he does is put his name on things and makes money off of that. He takes other people's stuff, slaps his name on it, grifts some money off of the thing, and then completely bankrupts the business. That's his model.
It's good work if you can get it. He only screwed it up when he ran for president.
No, when he won the presidency.
Yeah.
Because if he could be popular and continue running perpetually, that would be the best thing for him.
I still think he's wrecked his brand. I mean, the Trump brand is tarnished, let's just say. And prior to his run for presidency, there were people lining up to buy condos and buildings with Trump on the side.
I'm sorry.
I know it seems hard to believe.
The guy bankrupted 2 casinos. I mean, just now it's tarnished. Like his entire brand is just a bunch of fake crap that's been built up through everywhere. Everybody who's ever done business with him gets
Trump
burned.
Steaks, Trump vodka,
all
Trump
gone,
Airlines,
all gone,
USFL.
All gone. Everything he touches turns to crap. In fact, he didn't even bother showing up for his own TV show that actually made him something. Mark Burnett had to edit him into something that looked like a CEO. The guy, and now I'm laughing because now that his name is tarnished. It's just, come on, people.
Well, again, his name became tarnished when he ran for the presidency. And of course, when he won, and then when he governed in a god-awful fashion. 844-967-2789. I'm glad you're chuckling, though.
I have to.
Maybe in that you're named after the Clayfish's dog, maybe we'll have to change your nickname to Chuckles.
We named the dog Indiana.
844-967-2789. Dick from the garage in Madison. Welcome back, Dick. What do you got for us?
Well, a Mueller report, I have it, but you only get about 60% of it. It's all blackened out. So what are you really reading?
Do you get to trade it in for the unredacted copy that ever makes it to publication?
Oh, did that ever come out? I'm not aware.
Come on, man. If there was an unredacted Mueller report, our buddy Jim Santel would be telling you to go buy it and read it, Dick.
Right.
No,
exactly.
I don't think it's dropped yet.
To these polling numbers, I'm as guilty as anybody about being a Monday morning quarterback. But the big one that cracks me up is the low marks for the war in Afghanistan. Trump, let's see. In these 4 years, healthcare, no. Infrastructure, no. Handling of the COVID, terrible. What makes people think that he would have handled this any other way than horribly?
Well, of course, because he's
disaster.
Claiming he would have after the fact, Dick.
Yeah. What he really should say is, I alone can F this up. Because he would have, and he would have.
Well, he did have a track record of effing things up, to use your vernacular, sir.
I alone can fix it.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts,
I guess
Dick?
my point is,
go ahead.
Point is that the guy's track record is pathetic. So why would anybody think he'd do any better on the pullout in the war in Afghanistan? Probably would have done worse than he did with COVID.
Well, it depends on how you ask the question. The Newsmax article, the rewrite it, the Rasmussen poll. I read a question to Fancy Brian before from this poll. It's like, sure, you thought Trump was aggressive, but now that you see how weak Joe Biden handled Afghanistan, what do you think of Trump now? And, Trump would have done better. And when phrased in the proper context with the right push polling, you can push up relatively big number, Dick, that would support a statement like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just what you just said. It's how you ask the question and how you frame it. But I personally think that he would have screwed it up royally.
Well, that's just predictive talk, Dick. Appreciate you listening. 844-967-2789. You know, people love when I read aloud. Yeah, Fancy, save the people. They don't want to hear it. I'm kidding, but go ahead.
I was just giving you the time signal to let you know how much time left in this segment.
Oh, I thought you were signaling like, please don't read it.
No, do you want me to tell you about
a brief 3 minutes of reading aloud. Here is an opinion piece by Jennifer Rubin. We quote her often. More evidence that talking to Republicans is useless. If you're listening, Republicans, I'm talking to you right now, even though I know it's useless. 844-967-2789. I'm going to read a little bit of the Rubin piece. Republicans have proved at every turn that they are not merely incapable of governing, but are determined to cause havoc and real harm to America. From the refusal to create a January 6th commission, to their assault on voting rights, to their obstruction on raising the debt ceiling and confirming executive branch nominees. More examples of their destructiveness arrived on Wednesday. The Washington Post reports that two former Treasury secretaries who served under Republican presidents, Henry Paulson and Stephen Mnuchin, and here's the quote, held private discussions this month with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. The former secretaries and Yellen essentially pleaded with McConnell to vote to lift the debt ceiling rather than wreck the economy. It was no go. The Post quotes former Democratic Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers is saying, reality is not a partisan thing. Raising the debt limit is acknowledging reality, not making a partisan choice. Well, that is quaint, according to Jennifer Rubin. A little bit more here. Acknowledging reality is the most partisan thing to do these days, whether it's who staged the attack on the Capitol, how to protect the country from the Delta variant, who won the 2020 election, or what happens when the United States does not pay its bills. Republicans routinely operate in a parallel universe in which the funhouse mirror of right-wing media reshapes reality to fit the mega agenda. The least effective strategies with Republicans is to appeal to their sense of patriotism or shame them into doing the right thing. Republicans operate in a singular principle. Whatever helps them retain or accumulate power, they will do, no matter the harm to America. Come back with us. Perhaps a little more reading alouding, unless you save us all, by dialing right now, 844-967-2789. Republicans. I don't even know if I can talk to you people.
You know, I
was
just
even live in the same reality we live in.
I was just smiling because you reminded me that Steve Mnuchin is no longer in office.
Is he back to producing movies?
Don't care.
More Devils. We'll be back.
It's just me and Fancy here right now.
You know what? I'm happy.
Hey, Wisconsin, this is Kirk Bankstad, and I own the Minocqua Brewing Company. Usually, I promote my progressive beer on this station, but today I wanted to promote these guys at Devil Radio. Devil Radio is the only progressive talk station in the state, and there are no less than 81 conservative talk stations in Wisconsin that spew crazy Trump cult rhetoric. While the Republicans have big pockets to fund these stations and manipulate Wisconsinites to vote against their own interests, Democrats have to rely on grassroots donations to get their message out. So I'm asking you to donate some money to these guys and keep them on the air. And I'm asking you to do it in September because every dollar you donate this month will be matched by an anonymous donor that cares about making Wisconsin a democracy again and knows that this radio station helps with that mission. So please donate today at devilradio927.com at the Support Devil Radio tab. Again, send some big bucks to devilradio927.com at the Support Devil Radio tab.
600,000 Wisconsin families are receiving checks to help take care of their kids, thanks to the expanded child tax credit passed by Joe Biden and congressional Democrats. Ron Johnson voted against these checks for Wisconsin families, despite voting for a 2017 tax break that put more money into the pockets of millionaires like himself. It's time to vote Ron Johnson out of office. MoveOn.org political action, paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertisement. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
The Devil's Advocates.
James Santel, he's a former U.S. attorney. He's our guest live on Brady.
Once again, a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen, to talk about the latest news breaking as we speak.
The FBI raided Michael Cohen, Trump's personal attorney, but once they got there, then they went back and got a more thorough warrant and said, we'll take everything.
my first reaction is you need to teach criminal constitutional law. You've got it just right in terms of the process.
They are kind of a big deal.
This is a really big deal.
The Devil's Advocates. Rock and roll political commentary in a top 40 world.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. Just talking to my progressive friends. It's useless trying to talk to you conservatives. You don't learn anything. You don't live in reality. You don't do what's right for your country. You're not real patriots. If you don't like what I have to say, 844-967-2789. Bring it. Nancy Pelosi, I've been reading from this Jennifer Rubin opinion piece at the Washington Post. And the topic, what is it that Republicans aren't listening to? It's the reality of raising the debt ceiling and not crashing the economy and the full faith and credit of our nation. But of course, Republicans have other plans. Here is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Here's what she said. Cut number 70, if you would, Fancy.
We'll get more estimates as to how much money comes in on certain things, but we know that we can cover the proposal that the president has put forth to build back better.
The covering part means the paying for. The $3.5 trillion proposal, the Democrats feel like they've got an outline, a framework, a way to pay for it. More from Nancy Pelosi. In regards to the debt ceiling, we already owe this money. Stop stiffing people. Cut 71.
This is to pay the incurred cost. Last year, Democrats and Republicans together incurred costs for COVID that need to be paid for. This is a credit card bill that we owe.
Well, just do what Trump would do, Nancy. Just stiff the guy. Cut 72.
The former president was famous for not paying his bills, and they want to do that again, but we cannot let them do that and jeopardize our economy.
Well, let's hope not. Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, he's aspiring to be the future Speaker of the House. But here's what Kevin McCarthy had to say again on the infrastructure. He's voting no. He's a no, 75.
I don't view it as a bipartisan bill any longer, where the Democrats have now made it one over $5 trillion bill, one without the other. It only harmed the nation even more. I'm voting no.
Of course he is. 76, more Kevin McCarthy, please.
They have their internal firing squad right now upset with each other because one side won't vote for it unless they get reconciliation. So whatever agreement they come upon is not about the infrastructure bill. It's about whether they can spend $5 trillion.
Well, I would say that might be accurate. The Democrats are log jammed right now because there's the bipartisan bill, the $1.5 trillion bill. And I've always made it very clear, to my opinion, we don't get a second bill. So you can take the little fish or you can take the big fish, because you're not going to have Republican support ultimately. They're not going to let you have two fish.
That may be, but I also take exception with his characterization that they just want to spend just to spend. I'm tired of that crap where you're just trying to tax and spend all the time just for the principle of spending. It's not like I'm just sitting here. It's not like it's Brewster's Millions. We just have to get rid of it all. They're actually, there's actually things in there they're spending it on. Well, talk about that.
Here's what I take some issue with. You talk about $5 trillion seems like a really big number, except that's over a decade. That's $500 billion a year. And I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, but that's still only 2/3 of what we spend on defense each and every year. We're spending over $700 billion on the national defense, nation building, blowing up the Middle East.
Well, we can save $300 million now a day, right?
Up to $300 million a day we were expending for the right to fight a 20+ year war in Afghanistan. 844-967-2789. Maybe one more here. Kevin McCarthy on the January 6th subpoenas talked about this with Joe Zepecki earlier. Subpoenas are coming, and they're coming rapidly. And let's hear what Kevin McCarthy has to say. 78.
This is more about politics than anything else. There's only two questions that this committee should actually be looked upon. Why was the Capitol left so ill-prepared? And how can we make sure that this never happens again?
Only two questions, not, who conspired or whether or not it was incited by the president or what sort of violence or how many of your colleagues, let's call them Republican caucus members. Hell, Kevin, you might even be a direct material witness. So I think even you are going to get asked a few more questions when the January 6th committee convene. 844-967-2789, or perhaps reconvene, because they did have the one hearing, but I'm eagerly anticipating more. Wisco Paul, how you doing, Paul?
Hey, I'm doing okay. One thing about the party, a lot of people ask me about Betsy, and so Betsy, a lot of people like to see you. So there's another party. Get there. You're pretty popular.
I got a Devil Radio Day reception coming up on Monday. You could party with me again. I'm going to be out in the public Monday of next week, 927 Devil Radio Day. I'll be out at Herbal Aspect. They've got their new brick and mortar location. We're going to do a grand opening. So, not a full-fledged stay all night party, but a reception. There'll be wine. There'll be Delta 8 and perhaps cheese.
Well, at any rate, Betsy, you're really popular. Hey, and as far as the January 6th investigation, they can't get that going quick enough because there's no doubt in my mind corporate America was involved in this. Somebody funded all these people, and Trump was behind it along with some congressional people. That's just, if this would have been ran right, it would have never happened. So it had to be an inside job. There's no doubt about it. And I don't understand. I've never seen people follow a loser like this because Trump is a loser. And, usually you lose a presidential election, you never heard from again, but apparently that's not the case. And it just amazes me with this Trump thing. I don't get it, Crudy. So anyway, thanks for taking my call, and good show today. And you too, Brian. Bye.
Well, I got to tell you, Paul, if you want to know how people can follow someone like Trump, the entire nation of Germany is absolutely in love with David Hasselhoff. I don't get it either. So every now and then, like a whole group of people just loves a big idiot, and I think they're great people.
Yeah, but Germany didn't elect David Hasselhoff chancellor.
You never gave him the chance
They got Merkel. I mean,
give him a chance.
Come on. I give the German people more credit than the American people.
So do I. I'm more just saying there's no accounting for taste.
Obviously. But hopefully you have some. You're listening right now. We are the Devil's Advocates. That's Fancy Brian. I'm Crudy, coming back for the 4 o'clock happy hour. I'm going to take many more of your phone calls. Dial them up. 844-967-2789. If you're listening on AM 950, Matt McNeil is next. The rest of you, stick around. It's the party. It rolls on. The happy hour is next.
Nobody knows more about debt than I do.
So, Obamacare is still in place, and we've doubled the debt. I don't feel like my time here has been particularly successful.
And yes, losers. They are losers.
Hey, I'm here from Knuckleheads. Have you seen our new location yet? Come on down to 520 State Street for all your CBD needs. We have a huge selection of gummies, oils, and a variety of other CBD products. We also have a gigantic walk-in humidor. The knowledgeable staff at Knuckleheads will work with you to find exactly what you need. Mention Devil Radio at checkout to get 15% off your next order. Knuckleheads, now at 520 State Street. We'll see you there.
This is Rocker. I'm sitting on the patio at Salvatore's Tomato Pies on East Wash, and I'm enjoying a floral-forward Manhattan called As Long as There's Whiskey. It features Rocker Rye whiskey with a hint of blueberry, a touch of smoky Amaro, and it's finished off with Saint Germain. It's a Rocker Rye Manhattan at Sal's Tomato Pies on Livingston. Ask for it by name as long as there's whiskey. You can also enjoy Rocker Spirits at the Wisco and Tiny's Tap on Willie Street. You must be 21. Please drink responsibly.
You are listening to WTTN 1580 AM Columbus and W224 EG 92.7 FM Madison. Always streaming on the Devil Radio app.
AP News. I'm Ed Donahue. In Collierville, Tennessee, near Memphis, shots were fired at a local grocery store. One person was killed, 12 others injured at a Kroger store. Police say the shooter was found dead of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Advisors to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are recommending booster doses of Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine for people 65 and older, nursing home residents, and people who are 50 to 64 with underlying medical conditions. Dr. Matthew Daly is one of the advisors.
The goal is to prevent serious illness and COVID-19 from anyone in the country, for everyone in the country. So this isn't about who deserves a booster, but it's about who needs a booster.
Advisor Dr. Helen Talbot is not recommending it.
That's not really the answer to this pandemic. And I'm scared I'm going to get quoted for this, but I feel like we're putting lipsticks on frogs. Like, this is not going to solve the pandemic.
The shots would be given at least 6 months after the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom approved spending nearly $1 billion to prevent wildfires.
We feel a deep sense of responsibility here in the state of California because of the smash mouth realities of climate change, not just the issues of the acuity and frequency and duration of these wildfires, but also what's happening with this mega drought over the course, over the entire west coast of the United States. 6
of California's 10 largest wildfires have happened in the past year. Evacuations have been ordered in a Northern California community near Redding as a new wildfire spreads. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says President Biden has put the country in a constant state of crisis. Afghanistan, at the Mexico border. He says some compare this administration to Jimmy Carter's in the 1970s.
But with the crisis after crisis continuing to unfold under the Biden watch, I now realize that comparison is an actual insult to Jimmy Carter.
Stocks finished higher, the Dow up 506 points. This is AP News.
Now that commission-free trading is the norm, it's time to rethink how we define value. Value is more than a price tag. It's the confidence of knowing you have a team of traders on standby to answer any question. It's thinkorswim's charting and analysis tools, and it's a personalized education to fine-tune your skills. Value is becoming smarter with every commission-free online equity trade. Discover true value with TD Ameritrade, where smart investors get smarter.
Dell's semi-annual sale is the perfect opportunity for a significant business upgrade. Save up to 45% on Dell computers built for business with Windows 10 Pro. Plus, enjoy special pricing on Dell docks, monitors, servers, and more, all with easy financing options through Dell Financial Services. Succeed anywhere with Windows 10 Pro. Speak to a Dell Technologies advisor today to find the right tech for your business with fast, free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
Chad's Design Build is proud to sponsor the Summer of Love on Devil Radio. We are committed to our community to demand better for each and every person. Doing the right thing isn't necessarily easy or inexpensive, but when we take the time to listen and learn, we can build a better community. Thoughtful remodeling is a lot like building an effective, progressive coalition. It takes patience, intelligence, and love. Experience helps too. Thank you, Joe Biden, and thank you, Devil Radio. On behalf of Chad's Design Build, here's to the Summer of Love.
This is Crudy, and I recommend calling Dave and the team at Community PC to solve all your computing needs. Why do I call Community PC? Because I don't want to learn new things about tech. Because I don't want to call the manufacturer's customer service line and waste half the day of my life. Because I don't want to ask my kid for help and have him respond, okay, boomer. Just call Community PC at 608-268-7178 for their patient service. Just let Community PC fix it. 608-268-7178. Call today.
This is Kirk Bankstad, and I own the Minocqua Brewing Company. This week, our brand new beer called Filibuster Ale will hit store shelves in Madison and across the state. Not only do I think that you're going to love the taste of this hazelnut or filbert, get it, brown ale, but I'm hoping to call attention to the reason we can't pass legislation to help solve so many problems in this country. The filibuster allows the Republican minority led by Mitch freaking McConnell to block every attempt at making this country better. Unless we kill the filibuster, we can't pass legislation to ensure voting rights, reproductive justice, racial justice, climate action, or workers' rights. Our democracy is at stake, and this outdated rule is the biggest obstacle to saving it. Call your senators, both Tammy Baldwin and Ron frickin' Johnson, and plead with them to do what's right and kill the filibuster. Paid for by the Minocqua Brewing Company's Super PAC.
For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Luke Mathers with your headlines. Yesterday, Republicans in the Wisconsin State Assembly advanced a bill out of committee that would ban Wisconsin public schools from training teachers and staff and teaching students curriculum including topics about systemic racism and implicit bias. The bill could see a floor vote as early as next week, but is not expected to be signed into law by Governor Tony Evers. On Wednesday, Democratic lawmakers, along with Governor Evers, introduced legislation that would repeal the personal property tax in Wisconsin through a different method than proposed by Republican lawmakers earlier this year. Also on Wednesday, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services announced the state is currently experiencing a surge in new COVID-19 cases that is yet to peak. As of yesterday, the 7-day rolling average of cases is now 2,857, double what it was 2 weeks ago. You're listening to Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM.
Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the heart of liberal Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Best friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Now here are your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. We're sliding into the Thursday 4 o'clock happy hour. But I got some troubling news right from the top, Fancy Brian.
Oh, great.
A Republican joint resolution. And let me tell you, joint resolutions just mean, the Senate and the Assembly have joined together in a joint resolution. But
different than the joint resolution we're going to have in about 13 minutes.
Well, yeah, 4:20. Then we have our joint resolutions.
We have to resolve the joint. I got you.
Yes, well, resolve. But here's why a joint resolution is a little more troubling in this circumstance. When the topic is redistricting, understand some of the strategery these Republicans anticipate incorporating. Well, first and foremost, they would like to lock in the old maps. That's one of their tricks. And they want to lock in as much of the former districts as they possibly can, because, of course, that protects their overwhelming incumbencies. Because under the current gerrymandered maps here in the state of Wisconsin, Republicans have a clear electoral advantage, even though they get maybe half of the votes, less than that, depending on the elective cycle. They're carrying about 2/3 of the legislative seats. That's only done with some really stupendous partisan gerrymandering.
Yeah, they've been rated as some of the worst gerrymandered maps in the entire country. And that's going both ways. If you look at Chicago, it's completely gerrymandered in a different way. There's districts that look like a C in Chicago, but as far as Wisconsin goes, it is completely gerrymandered towards the, let's say, the red side.
Well, it certainly is. And what they are trying to accomplish, part of the Republican strategery, would be to avoid the governor's veto. Because if they could draw a map and, keep it away from Tony Evers, if he didn't have the power of the veto, let's say they used a joint resolution process instead of passing a bill. Let's say they, roll out these new maps as a joint resolution. And effectively, the legislative majorities, Republicans in both cases, of course, they just vote and say, these are the maps. And Tony doesn't have the right to veto them. That's part of the plan. So that's what my apprehension about today's breaking news. I found this at the Wisconsin Examiner. Republicans offer a joint resolution on redistricting. I mean, I read that and I'm like, oh God, here we go. Ruth Conniff, here is how she reports it. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos and Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu drafted a joint resolution establishing new voting maps and referred it to the Legislative Rules Committee Thursday, which put it on the calendar for the Assembly floor session next week. So they're taking up the drawing of the maps next week. The resolution's first 2 points are uncontroversial, stating that in drawing new legislative districts based on population changes in the 2020 census, the legislature should follow the law and attempt to create districts with nearly equal population. Well, yeah, one man vote, one vote. That's how the Constitution lays it out. That's the uncontroversial part. Here's the controversial part. The third point goes to the question of whether Wisconsin will continue to have gerrymandered maps that have allowed Republican legislative majority to increase the proportion of seats it holds, even when a majority of voters statewide cast their ballots for Democrats. The resolution commits the legislature to, and here's the wording of this joint resolution, retain as much as possible the core existing districts. There it is. Thus maintaining existing communities of interest. Voting rights groups have challenged the existing maps in court, and Governor Tony Evers' People's Maps Commission has invited the public to get involved with drawing district maps. Well, hell, even Robin Vos has got a portal now. Put your map up. Encouraging people to redraw districts that under current maps split up their communities of interest, such as watersheds, school districts, and other matters of public concern. There are so few competitive districts because of the way the lines were drawn 10 years ago, according to Rep. Deb Andraka, a Democrat from Whitefish Bay, the co-author of a bill to establish an independent, nonpartisan redistricting process in Wisconsin. Therefore, it's never going to go anywhere. But here is what she said. I would like to see our redistricting process be more fair and drawn in a way that represents communities, not the interests of individual politicians. Well, Deb, that is a quaint notion. Here's a little bit more. This resolution is yet another piece of the puzzle as Speaker Vos and his right-wing allies try to rig the maps and disenfranchise voters, according to Jacob Malinowski. Jacob, I'm sure that's not even close. I apologize. He is communication director for the Fair Elections Project, and he said in a statement responding to the Republican leaders' joint resolution, again, this is Jacob Malinowski, or something very close to that. The current map was thrown out in federal court for disenfranchising voters. And although that decision was overturned by a partisan Supreme Court majority, the substantive issues raised continue to go unrefuted. In 2019, advocates for both sides of recent redistricting battles in Wisconsin told the Examiner they believed the Republican-controlled legislature might pass new gerrymandered voting maps after the 2020 census using a joint resolution process that would allow them to avoid sending the map to Evers for his signature or veto. That's the strategery part, folks. The current joint resolution does not do that. Instead, it sets out principles that lay the groundwork for designing a new map. Well, it'll be a future joint resolution. One more quote here. Again, Malinowski. It's time we had a fair process and we start with actual communities, not the speaker's rigged 2011 maps.
You know, people always ask, how can they have these candidates? How can they have these representatives who don't believe in anything? They have no ideas. They have no nothing other than the Democrats are bad and we don't believe in government. Beyond that, there's not much ideas. They barely even showed up for the entirety of the pandemic. And the reason why is, why don't we have, because I talk to reasonable Republicans. I talk to reasonable conservatives. I have several friends that are reasonable conservatives, but I don't see them represented in the legislature. I don't see those reasonable ideas being brought forth. And the reason why is gerrymandering, because there's no need to compete in most of these districts. So you get basically, for lack of a better term, inbred candidates. Like, it's the same family over and over again doing the same thing. And by the time the next generation comes around, they're all a bunch of idiots. And for me, I don't want to gerrymander in the other way either. I don't want to. I want competitive districts because I want ideas to become the forefront and not just mudslinging. And hey, this person, didn't pay this, and this person, said this one thing, and oh my God, everybody's a racist and everybody's stupid. Well, can we just talk about, I don't know, getting 94 fixed so we don't have to always have it under construction? I don't know, things that people care about.
Oh no, Scott Walker would have told you people have orange barrel fatigue. Can't do any more road construction. Here's what I would say. I think you are on to a couple of salient points. Speaker Robin Vos often says in regards to this Republican legislative majority, better candidates, better ideas. Have you ever met Shea Sortwell? That's not the case. I mean, have you met these backbenchers, Janelle Brantham? It's not better candidates. These are not the best and brightest we have to offer. But if you come from let's call it a 55-45 Republican district, well, you're going to win. And if you win, you don't have to fear the general election. You don't have to fear the Democratic candidate in nearly any circumstance. But you know what? Robin Vos, the Speaker of the Assembly, and with these new campaign finance laws, care of Scott Walker and his own corruption and, the codifying of his corruption. Well, to codify Walker's corruption, they had to change some of the rules. And while they doubled the caps of direct campaign contributions to the candidates, used to be 10 grand Scott Walker could cash. Now it's 20. But there are no caps on donations to things like the Assembly Republican Committee. So Robin Vos controls the money to his caucus. And if you want to remain in the Republican caucus, you better stay on the good side of Robin Vos. And above and beyond that, the fear is not a general elective candidate. The fear, if you're a Republican in the state of Wisconsin, is Robin Vos is going to recruit an opponent to your right. That's what drove our friend Dale Schultz out of politics. I mean, I wish Dale had stayed and competed against Howard Markline, but he retired in no small part, despite the fact he was the twice elected majority leader for the Republican Party on the Senate side in the state of Wisconsin. The man retired rather than be, primaried.
So he looked into the abyss. That is what we're living through right now. Republican legislature has become the abyss of no ideas.
Well, Howard Markline still holds that seat, and he does have an opponent, and I like the guy, Tripp Stroud. Tripp Stroud did some legal work for me. He's an attorney by trade. He's running in Iowa County. Had a nice campaign launch. I've seen him out on the campaign trail. Tripp Stroud. Look and listen for that name. He could beat Howard Markline, perhaps with a newly redistricted, district over there. Come back, more Devil's Advocates. The happy hour. It rolls on.
I have never been more excited about anything that I have gotten the chance to work on.
Hi, this is Brad from Zero Res. If you need someone to help with your carpet cleaning, business or residence, please give us a call. We have the best system available and an amazing team of friendly technicians. Call us at 848-9000 or schedule online at zeroresmadison.com.
At Knuckleheads, our knowledgeable staff knows the ins and outs of CBD. Whether you're a veteran of cannabis like the Devil Radio team or a first-time customer, the Knuckleheads team has the information to answer all your CBD questions. Never heard of a tincture? We got you covered. Looking for something to address those achy joints? We got just the thing. Stop into our new location at 520 State Street and mention Devil Radio to our knowledgeable staff to get 15% off your order today. Knuckleheads, your one-stop shop for CBD in Madison.
600,000 Wisconsin families are receiving checks to help take care of their kids, thanks to the expanded child tax credit passed by Joe Biden and congressional Democrats. Ron Johnson voted against these checks for Wisconsin families, despite voting for a 2017 tax break that put more money into the pockets of millionaires like himself. It's time to vote Ron Johnson out of office. MoveOn.org political action, paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Do you want Wisconsin to suck? I don't. That's why you're listening to me now. I'm Hawk, owner of the Jade Monkey. Come to the Monkey and tell them you're there because the devil sent you. Then I can spend more money on ads and help Devil Radio keep Wisconsin from spiraling into post-apocalyptic Republican suckage. I mean, that's Iowa's job. Buy a round of the Jade Monkey and save Wisconsin one drink at a time.
Suck down drinks so we don't have to suck.
Okay.
Is your smartphone really a smartphone if it doesn't have the Devil Radio app? No, it isn't. Download the Devil Radio app in the Apple or Google Play Store and listen to the greatest radio station ever whenever you're on the go or stationary or whatever. It doesn't matter. The Devil Radio app is streaming 24/7. When you're gonna turn on the radio, you gotta listen to Devil Radio 92.7.
When they go low, we get high. Dom and Crooch are the Devil's Advocates.
It's the one and only Eagle Double G.
Welcome back from the 420 break. Me and Fancy Brian making a joint resolution up around here.
I feel like that joint has been resolved.
I think it has been. 844-967-2789. Callers, be patient, but we're going to take your calls in just a minute. I want to continue talking about redistricting. And obviously, we were out in the field this week and didn't maybe talk about the state Supreme Court taking up the redistricting case. And, you know, I think there are a few important things you, our fair audience, should know. First and foremost, it is a partisan decision, this 4-3 decision by the court to take up original jurisdiction, even though they're not prepared. The Supreme Court isn't where you go and try cases. The Supreme Court rules on cases that have been heard in a different courtroom, unless you are properly motivated and you want to go grab that case. And that was the decision made by the Wisconsin Supreme Court on Wednesday to take up the Republican-backed lawsuit over the state's 2021 redistricting process. Now, I found Laurel White's reporting here at the online daily urbanmilwaukee.com. I'd like to share a little bit of it with you. The lawsuit, which was filed last month by the conservative Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, asked the court to consider getting involved in drawing Wisconsin's next set of political district maps if Governor Tony Evers and the GOP-controlled state legislature fail to agree on districts through the traditional map-making process. Well, it's about 100% chance that Tony ain't going to sign off on Republican maps. Now, the Republicans might have their strategy. They might try to, do an end around on Tony through a joint resolution. But one thing you know for sure is there's not going to be concurrence on these maps. A little bit more here. The state constitution requires maps to be redrawn every 10 years based on new figures from the census. The lawsuit filing was considered a clear sign that Republicans would awfully much like the state's highest court, which has a 4-3 conservative majority, to have jurisdiction over the map making in the state. In the 4-3 order issued Thursday afternoon, the court agreed to take the case. Now, here's what Justice Rebecca Bradley wrote. And this is the bad Bradley. This is the conservative Bradley. And she's sort of contradictory even in her own statement, but you listen, you make your own call. Here's what she writes. We have a history of letting federal courts handle these matters, perhaps because it removes us from the thicket of political conflicts. Again, the words of Justice Rebecca Bradley. But here's where she contradicts herself. Our job, however, is not to avoid controversy, but declare the law. So even though the precedent is you go to the federal courts, and we've done that time and time again, this is an important decision, can't avoid the controversy. We want a big old piece of it. Serve us up this plate of controversy.
It sounds like the same type of logic they use when they're like, you know what? I should probably really recuse myself of the employer that used to employ me that I'm now hearing a case on. But you know what? My job is to interpret the law. So I'm not going to recuse myself.
Well, I don't know that we had the employment circumstances.
No, I'm pulling something out of the air, more the idea of a conflicted thing that they just said, well, I'm just not going to recuse myself, because it's happened a couple times.
I'm not sure if I love that analogy, Fancy Brian, but what I would say is that this is a clear change in tone from the court. And this is a different ruling than we've seen consistently from this court. Hagedorn is the swing vote, and Hagedorn prior has ruled a couple different times with the liberal minority that this is not the proper court of jurisdiction, that you don't start at the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you go to the district court, maybe the appellate court, and then you get there. A little bit more from this article. The majority's order prematurely injects the court into political process, this being written by Justice Rebecca Dallett, friend of ours. The majority order prematurely injects the court into political process, risks undermining the court's independence, and circumvents the statutory process for addressing redistricting challenges. Dallett also argued that if the courts do get involved in map making, it's more appropriate for the federal courts to do so. In the order, the court said it needs more clarity on the timeline petitioners are asking for to intervene in the redistricting. If necessary, it asked all parties involved to, offer briefs by October 6th. And Evers has called on lawmakers to consider maps that will be drawn by redistricting, the redistricting commission he created. But GOP leaders have not said they will do so because they will not do so. Evers has the power to veto any maps he doesn't like, unless they do some sort of joint resolution end around, which could send the maps to the courts. Maps have been drawn by the court several times in recent decades when Wisconsin had a divided government, like now. Wisconsin Supreme Court, well, that's a different story. So here's a thought, though. So the federal courts set a trial date, a 3-judge panel, and that's already the process. So it moves very rapidly. A 3-judge panel, they set a court date in January. And then the Wisconsin Supreme Court says, no, we get first crack at this. This is a state issue. It's a legislative issue. We're the court of jurisdiction. But there's something called the supremacy clause. So let's say the Wisconsin Supreme Court says, no, whatever the legislative maps are, that's the way it should be. And I strongly believe that's how they will rule, given the opportunity. And then the federal panel of judges is going to say, we have supremacy. The federal courts get to make determination. And of course, this redrawing of the map involves federal voter rights issues. And therefore, the federal courts can grab jurisdiction. So the federal courts can overrule the state courts, but the state court cannot overrule the federal courts. So even if the Republicans win at pushing this thing to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, all it probably does is further delays the timeline of drawing the maps, which is perhaps the Republicans' intent, because they'd love for us to get stuck using the same old gerrymandered maps again. But I cannot see a reality where that becomes the case.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of the courts drawing the maps in the first place. It seems a lot like the court creating laws and then ruling on them. I'd rather, I feel the process should be, here are maps, rule on them whether they're fair or not, rather than, oh, by the way, we're also going to draw them too. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying that the courts will end up actually drawing the maps themselves?
Yes, correct. That's what the federal court is best prepared to do. Historically, that's the role the federal courts have had. But understand, if the federal courts make the ruling, I mean, I guess specifically you could go up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but we've already seen the prior ruling, because Wisconsin's gerrymandering case has already been up the ladder and back down again. No, there won't be an appeal. What the federal court rules, to my opinion at least, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to be the Wisconsin Supreme Court. It's going to be the federal courts, but it's going to be messy between here and there. That's why you listen to the Devil's Advocates. We'll help clean it up for you. Come back, more of this big show. You could be a part. 844-967-2789.
I don't care what drug will work. Try a bunch of them.
Smoke weed every day.
This is the radio station you were looking for. Devil Radio 92.7. It surrounds us. It penetrates us. It binds the world together.
Help me, Devil Radio. You're my only hope.
Hi, everyone. This is Kirk Bankstad, and I own the Minocqua Brewing Company and make what I call progressive beer. with the faces of famous Democratic politicians and issues that matter to Wisconsinites on the can, like President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Fair Maps, our anti-gerrymandering IPA. 5% of all of my profits go to the Minocqua Brewing Company Super PAC, which is a fund that will hopefully help make deep red northern Wisconsin more progressive. We affectionately refer to it as dark money meant for good. Check out our latest release called Tammy Shandy, one of Wisconsin's many treasures. This wheat beer with natural lemon extracts celebrate our U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, who is a Wisconsin treasure, along with cheese, beer, and our awesome sports teams. To find out where you can buy Tammy Shandy and the rest of our progressive beer, go to our website, MinocquaBrewingCompany.com. That's MinocquaBrewingCompany.com.
Democrats agreement. I'm Tim McGuire with an AP News Minute. President Biden reaches agreement with Senate and House Democratic leaders on a funding framework for the $3.5 trillion social and environmental bill. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
It's not about a price tag or anything. It's about values, not dollars.
Neither Pelosi nor Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer would offer details. The House and Senate remain at standstill over funding the government past the September 30th fiscal year end and suspend the federal debt limit to avert a shutdown and default on payments. Senate Republicans refuse to take part despite the risk of triggering a fiscal and economic crisis. A suspected gunman apparently killed himself after 12 other people were hurt in a shooting this afternoon inside a Kroger grocery store in Collierville, Tennessee, some 30 miles from Memphis. Some of the wounded are in very serious condition. Police say officers went from aisle to aisle in the store, finding people who were hiding and leading them out of the store. I'm Tim McGuire.
Now that commission-free trading is the norm, it's time to rethink how we define value. Value is more than a price tag. It's the confidence of knowing you have a team of traders on standby to answer any question. It's Thinkorswim's charting and analysis tools, and it's a personalized education to fine-tune your skills. Value is becoming smarter with every commission-free online equity trade. Discover true value with TD Ameritrade, where smart investors get smarter.
Dell's semi-annual sale is the perfect opportunity for a significant business upgrade. Save up to 45% on Dell computers built for business with Windows 10 Pro. Plus, enjoy special pricing on Dell docks, monitors, servers, and more, all with easy financing options through Dell Financial Services. Succeed anywhere with Windows 10 Pro. Speak to a Dell Technologies advisor today to find the right tech for your business with fast, free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Luke Mathers with your headlines. On Wednesday, the Wisconsin Supreme Court agreed to hear a case petitioned by conservatives for the High Court to address redistricting disputes in Wisconsin. The petition was accepted one day after a federal court scheduled a January deadline for a federal lawsuit on the same issue, creating parallel redistricting lawsuits in state and federal court. In accepting the case before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, conservative Justice Rebecca Bradley argued the state court should be the judicial body to hear redistricting disputes, despite federal courts being the body that adjudicated the map drawing process in recent decades of divided government in Wisconsin. Mostly sunny skies in the forecast today with winds up to 20 miles an hour and a high today of 69 degrees. Clear skies expected to continue into the evening with temperatures expected to drop to around 49 degrees. You're listening to Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM.
The Devil's Advocates. Never personal, only politics.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, the Thursday 4 o'clock happy hour. It rolls on, and your calls, they're always welcome here. 844-967-2789. Going to the phones. Ross Middleton, you're next. What do you got for us, Ross?
Hey, Crudy. So gerrymandering, yeah, it's the big issue in my mind. Unless you don't have healthcare, that healthcare is an issue. If you're an immigrant, you're not a citizen, then that's an issue. But for those of us, this is the big one. This is the one that, like us, some moderates, like if we want to think that there are some reasonable Republicans, knowing that the world is half Republican in Wisconsin. So this is a big deal. To me, these Republican Supreme Court justices are so mediocre. When you look at Gableman's investigation of the whatchamacallit, it's just so mediocre. the thing would be like is what criteria when the Wisconsin case went up to the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, it got sent back because they basically said, so what criteria do we use? It's like they didn't even really know. And so like what criteria is the Supreme Court, a Wisconsin Supreme Court, going to use if they draw these maps? And like you said, it's going to get overridden. The other point that I was going to make, though, is I'm sure you've heard about what's happening in New York, in which they had a referendum and kind of a ballot measure that said they wanted fair and impartial redistricting, and it passed. But because they have a super majority with the Senate and the Assembly and the governor, they're probably going to override this ballot measure and gerrymander the heck out of New York to knock out like 5 Republicans. It's potentially 5 Republicans could lose their seat. So this whole gerrymandering thing is exploding, and I really blame the Supreme Court 2 years ago when they punted on the issue and sent it back to the state.
Yeah, they certainly did. Wasn't it Kennedy that
right?
I feel like Kennedy sent it back down and said, go find someone with proper standing, and then retired from the court.
Yeah.
Well, my only other fear, and I think that you're absolutely right, Ross. I think this is the issue of the year. I think between here and next April and April 15th is when you can start circulating ballots, when you can start qualifying, for an elective office. So you absolutely must have these maps in place in time for people to do that. And probably a month or so before, just to be fair to those trying to figure out which district, if you've been redistricted, if you're a state lawmaker and you've been pushed out of your district, and I wouldn't be shocked at all, Ross. I mean, we're going to see some pettiness play out. First, you're going to see the Republican drawn maps, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if a couple of the troublemakers in the Republican caucus, people like Janelle Brandtjen and Rantham, they've been a thorn in Robin Voss's ass. I think the first thing Robin Voss is going to do is stack them up double district, meaning he's going to throw a couple of Republicans in the same district and make them go fight it out. 2 candidates enter, 1 candidate leaves. Now, that's not exactly a fair map, but it'll, again, give him power. And that's what Robin Voss really likes. And the power, he's the most powerful man in the state of Wisconsin. About a week ago, Politico wrote an article, we have a shadow governor. It's the Speaker of the Assembly. And he has this kind of power because he exerts this kind of power through the gerrymandered maps.
If I was the only thing, if I was going to redraw the maps, and supposedly Voss has some website where you can go, if there is this rural urban thing going on, it appears that most of the Democrats are in these urban areas like Madison, Milwaukee, La Crosse, Green Bay, Eau Claire, Superior. If it was my choice, I would turn it into the spoke of a wheel, and just have, or like a pizza cut in diamond shapes, and just have a majority in the.
But Ross, buddy, that's partisan. We don't want wagon wheel districts. We want square and rectangular districts. And you let the chips fall where they may, my friend.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of thinking this whole thing needs to bust apart until the whole nation, until the U.S. Supreme Court handles this issue, because this is not the same world that our founding fathers set up. So it's gotten very partisan, all this kind of stuff. And so I think New York needs to go ahead and do what they're going to do and gerrymander the heck out of it. Wisconsin, if we could do it, I would turn it into a big pizza pie and have these mostly Democratic districts in which their pizza break the whole darn system down, and then the Supreme Court would be sort of forced to, and then we would all have to kind of come up with a mechanism. This is a tough one. This is a hard one.
Well, it certainly is, Ross. And if you're looking for solutions from the U.S. Supreme Court with 3 Trump appointees, I mean, one of them was in replacement of Kennedy, but Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett are not going to be the salvation of nonpartisan redistricting. And let's not forget, when the Wisconsin case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, we were the example of a highly partisan gerrymander on the Republican side. But the state of Maryland is just the opposite. The state of Maryland is highly partisan gerrymander to the Democrats' benefit. And if we think that we, the Democrats, are somehow going to scare the Republicans by gerrymandering a couple states, Illinois and Wisconsin and Maryland, let's say, Well, let's not forget, currently there's like 23 states where Republicans have all the control. They control the assembly or the House of Commons, whatever they call it. They control their state senates. They control the governor's mansions. So there are far more states that can gerrymander to Republican advantage. And you can think, well, I don't care what they do in Nebraska. I don't care if they screw some state lawmakers and they have an overwhelming Republican majority because they went and gerrymandered Nebraska. But when they're gerrymandering, they're not just gerrymandering legislative state level districts. It's not about the assembly and the Senate exclusively. It's about the US Congress. And the gerrymandering, just through pure mathematical addition for Republicans, they're probably going to pick up about 8 seats in this elective cycle in this midterm 2022. Republicans will, just through the power of the gerrymandering of congressional districts. And in 2014, we did a little press conference and tried to roll out our own story on this issue. Right here in the great state of Wisconsin, it is in writing. Every congressional district in the current sense is unconstitutional and was declared as such by the Government Accountability Board. And here's what they said, and this was back in 2014. I found this. It took me 14 months to dig this out through public record searches, but it said it right in the Government Accountability Boards. They laid out and they said, effectively, we don't have a single constitutionally allocated congressional district because the Republicans in their hubris and their rush to so gerrymander the districts, they used inaccurate maps, like topographical maps that didn't reflect cities in their right places. And then they built, because they didn't build out, they already had their intent. They laid their intent on top of these incorrect and erroneous maps. And the Government Accountability Board, the old elections board, had to go back after the fact and try to clean up their unconstitutional messes in the best way they could. And it's all in writing. Yet we've continued to operate on these unconstitutionally gerrymandered congressional maps for at least 6 years, because I dropped that story in 2014. Come on, man.
That's just one. Okay. That's absolutely just horrible at the same time. But having, so you're saying that they drew maps over wrong maps, knowing that it's going to be overlaid over a different map.
Yeah.
So they had to keep in their heads where the reality was versus where the map that they were using was.
They didn't care about what reality was. They cared about getting their maps put in place.
I got you. My point is like the actual nuts and bolts of having to make that map. They had to keep 2 maps in their mind the whole time. Wouldn't it just be easier to come up with just a better idea and win on that? Like they really had to really think about this really hard to make sure they could do this.
No, you just have to set aside reality, which is effectively what they did. They didn't run these parallel maps, Brian. They ran partisan gerrymandered maps, and they dropped them over erroneous tiger maps, topographical maps as they're called. And they didn't give a damn what reality was. They just went and left the GAB to clean up their mess, their unconstitutional gerrymander after the fact. Because who cares if we get, city boundaries accurate? Who cares if we put, you in the wrong city because we used inaccurate maps? Doesn't matter.
It's just a lot of effort, just so much effort that you could just be a better candidate.
That would be leaving things to chance. And you got to admit, Republicans have had tremendous impact with this gerrymandering. I mean, it's been to their tremendous benefit. We've had a decade of Republican rule here, like 11 years of Republican rule. We had one red election in 2010, the Tea Party and the pushback against Obamacare. And we've been stuck with the bad consequences ever since. And the Democrats, the legislative Democrats, they could have done something before the redistricting. And in their hubris, Wisconsin Democrats, they thought they were going to win re-election and they were going to gerrymander the maps. They were going to create the wagon wheel spokes and spread out the population and cast it to Democratic benefit. So Democrats are not without blame in this, but Republicans effectively, well, they executed their strategery better, and the U.S. Supreme Court's not going to clean up this mess. 844-967-2789. Going back to the phones, our pal Chris from Sun Prairie. Been far too long, Chris. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing okay. This is a topic I'm pretty interested in. It was something that I learned about back in the uprising. It was one of the first hearings that I kind of sat through from the beginning to the end. And I watched Mike McCabe do a great presentation on the maps. And I watched the people that presented for the Republicans. There were some lower level staffers that came in because I think the Republicans were embarrassed presenting the maps that they presented. And I learned a lot. And there were boundaries. Usually you respect the local boundaries. And then they put, like the county boundaries down. And then, you go in those layers so that you don't break up, like you were saying, local towns and, fire departments, police departments, schools, stuff like that. But something I wanted to point out was you weren't talking about was when you have these things, you're putting the power in the hands of one party person too. Like you were talking about Robin Voss, being able to basically tell people whether or not they could have these districts. And I think that is the real danger. I think the real danger is that he can make people walk lockstep with him on legislation. And that's how we've gotten a lot of these bad laws passed. And I think that is the real danger here is the control that's coming from outside and how we can control it. It essentially takes democracy away.
Well, Chris, I agree with everything you just said. And in fact, we got some insights from former Republican Senator Dale Schultz on this very topic. And Dale pointed out when this redistricting was done, they would bring in the individual Republican lawmakers one at a time, and they'd make them sign non-disclosure agreements, sort of a la Donald Trump. So you couldn't talk about what happened at Fight Club, at Redistricting Club, and they'd bring you off campus. They'd take you down to their favored law firm, Michael Best and Friedrich, and they'd show you the map, but only as it affected your district. And Dale Schultz told me, well, my district was a little more Republican than it had been prior. Didn't seem too terrible. But of course, what they didn't know was what was happening. Individual lawmakers didn't know what was happening in cumulative. And in cumulative, Robin Voss was stacking the map, and he was taking control for a decade. And he was taking control not just of the legislative process, he was taking control of the caucus. Your thoughts, Chris?
Well, my thoughts are that our representatives are supposed to be representing us and our interests, and they should not be doing these end runs around the people and the vote and democracy. We need to represent the interests of a town, the interests of a municipality, the interests of a county, of a state. And these guys are undermining democracy, and we need to stop this. And I really think that we need a huge grassroots movement of people getting out and starting to talk to one another and realizing what they do. The Republicans come down to Madison to pass bad legislation, and then they go back home and they say, look what Madison is doing to you.
Chris, you make excellent points. We're out of time for this segment. One last one for your phone calls. 844-967-2789.
Well, who says life is fair? Where is that written?
Well, history's written by the winner, so it largely depends on who's writing the history.
I think people will do what's right. They don't need a government mandate to do that.
At Chad's Design Build, our tagline is building a better world, one remodeled home at a time. Simply stated, we want to be a part of the solution to leave the world better than we found it. That's why we've invested in a 20 kilowatt solar array, which provides over 90% of our electrical demand at our shop, office, and design studio. And that's why we invest in local causes which provide opportunities and which confront structural inequality. At Chad's Design Build, we are proud to partner with you, building a better world, one remodeled home at a time.
This is Rocker. I'm sitting on the patio at Salvatore's Tomato Pies on East Wash, and I'm enjoying a floral forward Manhattan called As Long as There's Whiskey. It features Rocker Rye whiskey with a hint of blueberry, a touch of smoky Amaro, and it's finished off with St. Germain. It's a Rocker Rye Manhattan at Sal's Tomato Pies on Livingston. Ask for it by name, As Long as There's Whiskey. You can also enjoy Rocker Spirits at the Wisco and Tiny's Tap on Willie Street. You must be 21. Please drink responsibly. Hey man, you still driving to Beloit for gummies and carts?
Yeah, man, it's a real drag.
Well, stop wasting gas, man, and ride your bike over to Williamson Street and stop into Quality CBD. They have gummies and carts.
Huh? They have gummies?
And all your favorites like Delta 8, Delta 10, and THCP.
Wow, man, where are they located?
Find Quality CBD at 1222 Williamson Street in Madison. For more information, visit qualitycbd.org. That's qualitycbd.org.
So, Darcy Haber, I hear you have solar panels on your office building. Are all real estate brokers tree huggers?
Crew, you should know that at Solidarity Realty, we provide outstanding real estate service while adhering to our core progressive values. Environmental sustainability is a big part of that.
So you really walk your talk, huh?
Yep, I even walk to work.
Come on, always?
Well, sometimes I bike. And if I have an appointment across town, I use my hybrid.
Solidarity Realty. They're real, they're solid, and they're honest. Find them online at solidarityrealty.com. There is an alternative.
From Wisconsin Dells to Dousman, WTTN 1580 AM is essential radio to get you through the pandemic.
The Devil's Advocates, because freedom.
Well, turn it up there.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, the Thursday edition, running out of time. But I've got a new update on the redistricting right here in the great state of Wisconsin. I mean, this is going to be a focus. I'm sorry if you're bored by redistricting, but this is going to be the battle for the soul of the great state of Wisconsin for the next 9 months. One day, and this reported by our friends at wispolitics.com, one day after the state Supreme Court agreed to hear their redistricting lawsuit, GOP voters asked a federal court to stay proceedings in 2 lawsuits, asking a 3-judge panel to draw Wisconsin's political lines if Capitol leaders fail to reach a deal. So they're basically, Republican activists are asking the federal courts to stay out of it. Why are they doing so now? Well, let me read. The voters, who include conservative activist Eric O'Keefe, well, he helped corrupt the campaign finance laws in the state of Wisconsin for the benefit of Scott Walker. You remember Eric O'Keefe had previously tried to get the federal court to stay proceedings while the state Supreme Court was considering their request to take the lawsuit. But the 3-judge panel shot it down, noting that there was yet no indication the state courts will entertain redistricting in the face of an impasse between the legislature and the governor. The GOP voters today notified the federal courts that state justices have agreed to take original action in their suit and ordered briefs related to issues in that suit. They argued the facts have now materially changed since their first motion to stay was denied. They also argued the U.S. Supreme Court has made clear that the federal courts should stay out of redistricting cases while the state judicial process, proceedings are pending. So here is a statement from their motion. The prospect of overlapping and perhaps conflicting, and I think they might conflict, federal and state discovery, expert and trial schedules, rules, and orders is simply untenable. Indeed, the mere need of parties to double all litigation efforts will necessarily impede state proceedings. The 3-judge panel set an October 1st deadline for parties in the federal case to respond to a motion to stay. It also pushed back to October 1st, the deadline for parties to submit a proposed case schedule to the federal suits. Like the case before the state Supreme Court, the federal suits argue it's unlikely GOP lawmakers and Democratic Governor Tony Evers will reach a deal on a map. Represented by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, will the GOP voters ask the federal courts to step in and draw new lines if that occurs? Meanwhile, the attorney for GOP lawmakers will filed notice with the did file notice. I guess this is a past tense. Filed notice with the court today. The case should be dismissed now that every branch of the Wisconsin government is now addressing reapportionment. So basically, the breaking news is that the federal courts told Republicans, we're going to set up a schedule. And then Republicans sought to involve the Wisconsin Supreme Court that went against their prior rulings that they shouldn't take original jurisdiction and said, in this case, we want it. And now that they've got a compliant and a cooperating Wisconsin Supreme Court, Well, now they're asking the federal courts to stay out of it. This is the battle that is going to wage this battle to get it into the federal courts for the benefit of fair maps. Let's say that's the Democratic point of view. And of course, the Wisconsin Republicans want it at the Wisconsin Supreme Court because they control the legislative, I guess you'd call that the judicial majority. In retrospect, we're going to look back on that Lisa Neubauer, Brian Hagedorn race, the $5,600 vote margin of loss for the, liberal justice. Cases like this, I know a lot of people have sort of tempered to Hagedorn. Oh, he's judicially independent. He's a good guy. Yeah, but he went along with this. We'd have been better off with a true liberal on the court, not a quote unquote swing justice.
I'm hoping he nerds out and says, I've been working on these maps so that they're the most nonpartisan maps ever. And I'm just hoping
Scott Walker's attorney?
Yeah, probably not going to happen.
Guy that wrote Act 10?
Hope. Probably not, though.
Don't hold your breath, big guy. 844-967-2789. Unless you're holding your breath and hoping Betsy's going to call. Betsy, welcome back. What do you got for us?
Critty, you sound like this is exciting. I mean, you're like getting all revved up. Are you getting ready to fight?
Well, hell yeah, sister. That's what we do. And I can't really control the outcome of this battle. I mean, it's the lawyers that are going to fight this battle. But I at least want you, our fair audience, Betsy, to understand the how important this is. And if there is a chance to influence, let's call some of the decision makers, we're not going to influence the federal courts or even the state courts. But, we might be able to influence Tony Evers or maybe Robin Voss, or maybe I'm just being naive, Betsy.
Yeah, influence Robin Voss. Okay. Yeah, he's come on the show. You should get him on again. Okay.
I'll try. He's been on 3 times.
All right.
That's 3 more times than the governor's been on since he was elected governor.
That's a shame. That is a shame.
Well, his loss, my friend. His loss, because
I'll have to warn him. I'll have to warn him. You better get on the stick. Although he talks to Earl. He loves Earl. And Earl is perfect to have Tony on. So don't say that he hasn't come on, I guess. I shouldn't say that.
Well,
all right.
He hasn't come on the greatest radio show ever since he won election. He only needed us till he didn't need us, Betsy. But, I don't hold that against him. Thank you for your call, Betsy. Governor Tony Evers, you are always welcome here, sir. And I hope that this Citizens Map Commission, I hope this wasn't all just window dressing. I know a lot of very earnest people put a lot of efforts into trying to draw, let's call them fair maps, or at least give us something to work off of. So I think the governor of the state of Wisconsin, I know I give Tony a lot of grief, but he's doing the right thing. He's trying to do the right thing in terms of getting input from the electorate, from the public, putting maps out that aren't for the benefit of his party or the other party, but, putting out fair maps. I wish he would get out there and sell these maps and sell this concept, because now's the time, Tony. You're out of time, man. The battle is waging each and every day in the courts and in the court of public opinion. So anyways.
And Republicans should want this. They should want better candidates, because right now I associate Republicans with Shea Sortwell and Andre Jacques. That's the type of people. I associate Republicans with Robin Voss. That's the type of person I associate anybody that is Republican with. And I don't think that's the actual case with the real people who you would meet.
Well, Robin Voss at least is smart, clever, and let's call him very strategic. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to our fine guests today. They included my co-devil back in the 2:00 hour, Vegas Joe Zepecki, and of course, Charles Franklin, Marquette University Law School poll. He is our pollster extraordinaire, dropping some Wisconsin polling in November. Now, stick around, everyone. We got our good friend Earl Ingram. Sometimes the governor goes on that big show, and then Native Roots Radio, then Lay of the Land with Nate Timms, the Rural Caucus. They come on. Stick around. Keep it locked. Devil Radio all night long.
We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen. We must do something about this immediately. I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.